Revenge of the Broken Luna. A werewolf shifter romance audiobook. Written by Reinhardt. Chapter 1. The Bond Before the Ruin. The scent of iron and white blossoms clung to the stone arches of Moonspire Hall, and though the candles burned high above, the room remained suffocating. Silence had weight here. It pressed against the chest, a tension of breath held far too long. Ilyra Fenmore stood at the center of it all, spine straight despite the trembling at her knees. Her dress, a flowing thing of pure white, threaded with silver leaf to mark her purity and readiness, pulled like a moonlit puddle around her bare feet. It should have shimmered with joy. It felt like a shroud. The crowd stretched in a full circle along the obsidian columns, cloaked in the muted blues and grays of Blackthorn Ridge's high houses. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, jaws tight, eyes colder than the stone beneath their boots. Elder wolves watched from the terraces above, whispering like wind-rattling bone chimes. And at the far end of the ceremonial path, carved from black stone, stood Thorn Valen. Her mate. Her alpha. His broad shoulders were wrapped in the ceremonial cloak of the ridge, black fur trimmed in moonsteel, draped like power itself. His golden eyes locked on her, expression carved from frost. He had not smiled. Not once. Not even when the horn sounded to mark the binding hour. She had told herself it was nerves. That he was being stoic because of tradition. Because this was serious. Because he cared too much. Ilyra inhaled. Her hands, gloved in translucent silk, trembled as the ceremonial blade was placed in them. The blade to cut her palm. To offer her blood to the bond. Ilyra Fenmore, Elder Cavan's voice rumbled like a cave collapsing. Are you prepared to receive the Alpha's mark and take the oath of Luna? I am, she said, her voice small but clear. The blade bit into her skin, warm blood spilling onto the silver dish between them. She barely felt the pain. Thorn stepped forward. At last. He removed his glove and extended his hand, his fingers rough with callus, the only part of him she remembered ever being warm. He didn't smile. He didn't even look at her when she reached for him. The moment their hands touched, her blood on his skin, the bond began to stir. Warmth coiled beneath her sternum. The first tendril of the mate bond stretched across the air like a heartbeat, linking them in a rush of scent and sensation. Her breath hitched. His should have too. But Thorn didn't flinch. He didn't blink. His golden eyes burned into her, blank as polished metal. The silence swelled. Then, a scream. Nearest Vale, standing only steps behind Thorn, collapsed onto the stone dais, clutching her abdomen. Her pale gray gown, far too ornate for a spectator, billowed as she fell, and when her head hit the floor, blood burst from her lips. Get the healer, someone shouted. Too late. Nearest writhed. Her mouth foamed. Her nails clawed at the ceremonial pendant around her neck, the wolfstone symbol worn by expecting she-wolves. It cracked as it hit the floor, and from within, a soft red glow spilled out. The scent hit Ilyra next. Not just blood, but a tang of something metallic. Poison. Sharp and bitter, the way moonroots smelled when boiled wrong. Gasps rippled through the hall. The unborn heir, a voice whispered from the gallery. She's with child. Poisoned. She collapsed when the bond was made. She must have sensed it. All eyes turned. To Ilyra. No, she said at once, throat tight. No, I didn't. But Elder Cavan had already stepped forward. His massive hand lifted, demanding silence. The wolfstone was tampered with, he said coldly. And only those with access to the ceremonial chamber may have done so. The record shows one name entered this morning. He held up the small silver tablet. A flick of his clawed thumb, and the blood-sealed imprint shimmered red. Ilyra Fenmore. No, her voice cracked. It was an error. She's jealous, someone said, louder this time. She's barren. Everyone knows. She's always hated Nearest. She never even bled during the moon cycle. The words stabbed deeper than fangs. "I didn't touch her pendant," she shouted. "I didn't know she was." "Enough." Thorn's voice cut through the rising panic. She turned to him, heart breaking open. "Thorn." He didn't look at her. "I should have seen it sooner," he said, cold and flat. "Your envy runs deeper than I imagined." It hit her like a slap. "I never," her throat seized. "You can't believe them." "Not now. Not like this." "I tried," he said, and that broke her. She took a step forward, reaching for him, her blood-stained glove outstretched. He recoiled. Like she was filth. Like she was nothing. The bond that had begun to form moments ago was still there, barely. She felt it shudder. Wither. Like rot in the root of a tree. A small sound escaped her, like a whimper, like a creature wounded. Thorn pulled the Wolfong pendant from his neck, the ceremonial marker of a mated alpha. He held it for a beat, then turned to the Elder Council. "I reject the bond," he said. "No," she breathed. "She is not my Luna." Her knees gave out. The silver dish crashed to the stone beside her, shattering, her blood spattering the floor. Elder Cavan stepped forward, voice booming. "In accordance with the laws of the rich, the accused shall be stripped of name and rank. She will be sent to the Hollow, as is customary for those who seek to destroy the Alpha's line." "No," she shouted on all fours, white dress dragging in blood. "Please, you know me. You know me." Cavan ignored her. 2 guards approached from either side. "You can't, Thorn. Don't let them." He turned his back. Her scream cracked the air, wild and raw. She clawed toward him, sobbing, but the guards hauled her upright, their hands bruising. Cavan snapped a collar around her neck. Cold iron. Runes etched deep into the steel. The Death Wolf's chain, the mark of exile. "She shall be offered to the wolves at the next blood moon," he declared, "that they may judge her where we cannot." She thrashed, shrieked, begged. No one moved. No one met her eyes. The crowd began to murmur. The guards dragged her toward the exit, through the blood, through the ruin of her ceremony. At the doorway, she twisted, hair falling from its careful braid, face stained with blood and tears. "I didn't poison her," she whispered. "I didn't." But her voice was too small. The wolf howls rose above her. And the doors closed. Chapter 2: The Broken Howl. The air inside the punishment tower stank of piss, mold, and old silver. It pressed in around Ilyra like another skin, suffocating, inescapable, alive with memory. Her wrists ached where the shackles dug in, raw metal clinking softly as she sat slumped against the stone wall. Her white ceremonial dress was gone, ripped from her hours ago, shredded in front of smirking guards like some petty game. They hadn't even been gentle. Her underdress now clung to her like wet cloth, stained with dried blood and sweat. "On your knees." The voice came sharp as a blade, and before she could move, rough hands yanked her forward. Her knees cracked against the flagstones, skin scraping raw. One of them grabbed her chin and forced her head back. Another approached with a shallow iron bowl. "What?" A hand clamped over her mouth. The bitter, metallic taste of herbs flooded her tongue, and then the burning began. The contents of the bowl were forced down her throat, thick, oily, scalding. She choked, coughed, retched, but they didn't stop until the bowl was empty. When they released her, Ilyra curled to the ground, gasping for breath. Her stomach twisted, lungs burning, vision swimming. What did you?" "Wolfsbane root. And moof oil. Brewed strong." Her head jerked up, panic flaring. No, you can't." "It strips the bond," said the one holding the bowl. "And the wolf." The wolf. Her wolf. It writhed inside her now, shrieking silently as the potion tore through its essence. She felt it slipping, as though her soul was a thread unraveling from both ends. It had no voice. No claws. It couldn't protect her now. They took her hair next. She had always worn it long, as tradition dictated, braided in 3 parts to represent body, spirit, and bond. One swift motion of the shears, and the braids fell to the stone, limp like dead snakes. They shaved the rest down to her scalp. Stripped. Scraped. De-wolfed. No longer Luna. No longer wolf. No longer anything. By the time they chained her wrists and ankles again, she could barely feel her limbs. They dragged her outside into the late afternoon light. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast long shadows across the square. The clan was waiting. Hundreds of them. Highborn and lowborn. Elders and younglings. Warriors and seamstresses. All standing in eerie silence as she was pulled forward barefoot across the sun-warmed stones. Her head hung low. Her feet scraped over gravel, her exposed scalp burning under the harsh sky. Each step a humiliation. Each clink of her chains an announcement of her fall. And then, the laughter. It started softly. From one corner of the crowd, a smothered snort. Then a chuckle. Then others joined, louder now, their voices like crows cawing over carrion. She doesn't look so holy now. Thorn should have bound the other one. She always thought she was better. Look at her now. She lifted her head once, just once, and locked eyes with a young boy standing near the edge of the square. His eyes were wide, solemn. In his hand, he clutched a stone. He threw it. It hit her shoulder with a dull thud, pain blooming bright. Another followed. And another. No one stopped them. Not even when the stones hit her face. Not even when blood spilled from her brow. She didn't cry. Her tears had burned away with the potion. At the edge of the square, Elder Kevin stood, arms crossed, gaze unmoved. When she stumbled to her knees, he did not flinch. Only signaled the guards to haul her back up. Make way, one of them barked. Prisoner to be transported. A gate opened, and there it was, the bone cart. A cage of rusted iron and pale bones lashed together with sinew. It sat on 4 wheels that creaked with age, smelling of blood and rot. They shoved her inside, the door closing with a sound that echoed. She barely had the strength to sit. She collapsed against the side, breathing in shallow gasps, cheek pressed to the bars. The soldiers mounted their horses and snapped the reins. The cart lurched forward. She didn't ask where they were going. She knew. The hollow. The place wolves went when they were no longer wolves. The cart creaked down the forest path, jostling over stones, every bump sending pain lancing up her spine. Through the slats in the cage, she could see the treetops blur past, the sun sinking lower and lower. She hoped it would never rise again. The guards talked. They always did. Think she'll scream when they bite? Nah, she's the quiet type. Always was. I hear the wolves wait till your heart slows. Then they start at the eyes. One laughed. Dream feeding, they call it. You eat the soul through the sockets. Makes you see the gods. Bet she'll see every god there is. She curled tighter, nails digging into her own skin. There was nothing left to do. Nothing left to hope for. She'd begged. She'd bled. She'd been silent. She'd screamed. Nothing worked. No one came. Not Thorn. Not even the moon. Her hands shook violently. She pressed them to her face. Her mouth. Her teeth. And then, slowly, methodically, she bit. Hard. Into the soft flesh of her own hand. Trying to wake something. Anything. Pain shot through her, copper flooding her tongue. Still nothing. No wolf. No bond. Just the cage. Just the dark. When the cart finally stopped, it was well into night. A bitter wind swept through the clearing, and she knew without looking, they'd reached the edge. The hollow. One of the guards opened the cage. She didn't move. Another grabbed her by the ankles, dragging her out. Her skin scraped over bone-laced metal, and her body thudded against the dirt. She tried to stand. Couldn't. They dragged her again, deeper now, where the trees grew thinner and the ground grew soft with rot. Ahead, a pit gaped in the earth. Roughly circular. lined with moss and ancient runes. And at its base, bones. Hundreds. No, thousands. Skulls, spines, ribs tangled in a horrible mosaic. The remains of those thrown here before her. A graveyard without names. Dig, one said. She didn't respond. So they did it for her. With shovels, they carved a shallow hollow among the bones. A space just big enough for one body. When it was done, they dropped her in. The impact rattled through her, her back arching. She stared up at the stars above, pinpricks of cold light. One of them knelt beside the pit. Old rules say we bury you with the wolves. From a leather satchel, he pulled a strip of rotted hide, wolfskin long decayed, rank with age. With a practiced motion, he shoved it into her mouth. Her scream was swallowed whole. The scent nearly made her retch. They didn't care. One shove of earth. Then another. And another. The dirt began to fall, heavier now. Onto her chest. Her legs. Her face. Until the stars vanished. Until all that remained was weight. And silence. Chapter 3. 3 days below the bones. There was no sky here. No air. No mercy. There was only weight. Bone. Filth. And death. Ilyra's lungs had forgotten how to breathe long before her mind clawed its way back from the dark. Something wet slid across her cheek. Not water. Thicker. Sluggish. Warm. The pressure above her was immense, crushing her ribs, pinning her limbs in angles she didn't remember falling into. Her mouth was stuffed with something. Cloth? No. No, it was softer. Animal hide. Wolfskin. It filled her throat with rot and bile. She tried to gag and choked instead, the convulsion sending shockwaves through her body. Pain bloomed like fire. Alive. Gods. She was still alive. A whimper slipped through cracked lips as her tongue moved beneath the decaying fur. Blood spilled from her mouth, hers. Fresh. The realization struck her like a slap. She'd died. For hours. Long enough for the silence in her chest to stretch. Then something had stirred. Something in the corpses around her. Some wolf, long dead, had leaked its blood into her wounds. And her body, foolish, stubborn, unwanted, had clung to it. She should not be alive. Not here. Not like this. But the dead didn't get to choose. Neither did she. A low groan escaped her chest as she tried to move. The pressure above her shifted, but not enough. She was wedged between carcasses, one to her left, ribs snapped like broken antlers, one to her right, its fur sloughing off in matted, wet hunks. Another lay across her legs, and yet another directly on her chest, the weight compressing her sternum so tightly she saw black spots even in the dark. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe properly, couldn't move her right hand at all. She flexed her fingers, 3 of them responded. 2 did not. Tears slid down her temples. Salt into grime. Her hand had been mauled. The wolves. Or rats. Or rot. 3 fingers left. On her dominant hand. She didn't cry. The tears fell, but they came from instinct, not sorrow. That had burned out already. Along with pride. Along with everything else. She tried again to shift her legs. Something snapped, bone, not hers, and her foot twitched. There was space. A crack. Small. But space. She turned her head slightly and retched when her cheek pressed into open viscera. The corpse next to her had split at the belly, and its innards had been liquefied. A pool of decay cradled the side of her face like a pillow. The stench was beyond anything living should know. Her body tried to recoil. Her brain refused to let it. "I won't die here," she mouthed around the hide. But it came out as a sob. The wolf inside her stirred faintly, then hissed like something wounded and distant. She bit her own tongue. Hard. Pain exploded behind her eyes. Blood filled her mouth. Her body spasmed violently, the jolt sending her spine up into the bones above. Still, the wolf refused to rise. She bit again, until she couldn't feel the edge of her tongue. until she tasted iron and ash. "Wake up," she rasped. "Wake the fuck up." Nothing. She was alone. Utterly. Time became impossible. She drifted. Slipped in and out of consciousness. Fevered dreams and hallucinations intertwined with the stench and the dark. Then, soft footfalls. Fleshless. Bare. Familiar. And a voice. Smooth as silk, as cruel as frost. "I told you not to trust him." Ilyra opened her eyes, or thought she did. In truth, there was only vision inside her skull now. The dark pressed against her retinas. But the voice filled it. A figure stood above her, clothed in nothing but blood and moonlight. "Cora," she whispered. The figure smiled. But it wasn't her sister. Not anymore. Her hair was matted. Her gown torn. Her belly, the one that had once carried life, hung open, viscera dangling like garland. Her hands were clawed, her feet bare. And her face was still hers. "You always were the weak one," the phantom said. Ilyra whimpered. "You're not real." "No," the figure agreed, tilting her head, "but neither are you." "Not anymore. You died. I watched. I came back." The phantom crouched. Bone knees cracked. "Did you?" she asked sweetly. "Then why does your wolf hide? Why won't it howl for you? You're broken, Ilyra. Even your beast wants nothing to do with you. You let him do this. You let him mark you. You let him strip you. You let them drag you here like carrion. I didn't. You begged." Cora's mouth curled. "You cried. And now, look at you. Lying in the waste of better wolves. Stop. You're nothing but rot-wearing skin. Stop. Maybe it's good you can't shift. Imagine what kind of beast you'd be. Limping. Useless. Starving." "I said stop." Ilyra jerked up and slammed her forehead into stone. Blinding white burst through her skull. Her head fell back into the muck with a sickening squelch. Silence. Cora was gone. And Ilyra was still here. Still beneath the bones. Still unclaimed. Still breathing. Only rage remained. And pain. But rage had always lived where hope had died. She gritted her teeth and twisted her shoulder. Something cracked. But the pressure above her shifted. Another jerk. Another grind of broken bone. She shoved her left elbow up, into a space too tight for air, too tight for life. And yet, she pushed harder. Her right hand, broken and bloodied, refused to move. But she could curl 2 fingers. 2 were enough. She drove them up into the pile above, scrabbling for anything, air, light, weakness. They found nothing. So she used her teeth. Her own collarbone had been bound with a chain when they buried her, ceremonial, forged with rune nails. She sank her teeth into the rusted link. And bit. Her jaw screamed. She bit harder. The chain snapped. Her shoulder screamed next as she wrenched it from its socket, and with it came a gap, small, no more than the width of her wrist. But enough. With blood and mud and bile, she shoved her arm up. Dug. Tore. Scraped. Each inch forward carved strips from her hand. Her broken fingers cracked. Her nails tore off. Still she dug. Until her hand found air. Thin. Cold. But air. She choked on a sob that sounded like a growl. The earth tasted it. Smelled it. And began to answer. Above her, faint at first, then closer, came the first note of it. A howl. Low. Broken. Hungry. It was joined by another. And another. Dozens. She froze. The wind carried the scent of blood. Hers. Out into the wild. The wolves were coming. And she was still beneath the bones. Chapter 4. Crawl, tear, burn. The earth groaned above her. It wasn't just the sound of wolves now, it was the hunger. Their claws scratched through the dirt, a raw and guttural rhythm, and it vibrated through the bones that still half buried her. Ilyra pressed her good arm upward through the narrow slit she'd carved into the world. Her shoulder screamed in protest, already torn from its socket. Her skin caught on jagged edges of old femurs, fractured rib bones, rusted rune nails. She didn't stop. She couldn't. Her left hand, blistered and raw, clawed at roots and damp dirt, shoving upward in inches, then half inches, then fingernails. The blood from her broken fingers slicked the path but made it no easier. It stung like fire. Her breath was thin, wet, ragged. One final twist of her torso and something gave. Her shoulder dislocated with a crunch. Pain lit her skull like a flame. She didn't scream. She used the silence to lurch forward. Her head broke the surface first. The scent of night struck her like a blow, pine and rot, iron and wind. She dragged in a mouthful of air so sharp it burned. Above her, the stars flickered like pinpricks in a bruised sky. Clouds moved fast, windswept. Cold. Watching. She didn't dare pause. Her other arm followed, then her chest, then her torso, scraping raw over rock and bone. Her exposed skin tore open in ribbons. Layer after layer she left behind in the dust like shed identity. Like she wasn't just crawling out of a grave. She was molting. Rewriting. Her legs came last, and the process of pulling them free nearly made her pass out. Her hips lodged in the narrow gap of the wolf bone tunnel. She had to twist, grind, scream through clenched teeth until they tore loose and scraped along the rocks with a wet, sucking sound. When she finally lay fully on the surface of the hollow, gasping, shaking, she was drenched in filth. Blood. Old marrow. Her own sweat. And yet the moonlight touched her skin like it still remembered her name. She wanted to weep. Instead, she reached forward. But her arm gave out. Then the scent changed. Not rot. Not hers. Flesh. Warm. Male. Wolves. The earth trembled again. A low growl shattered the hush. The first one appeared between the rocks, white-furred, lean, ribs visible through its pelt. Its eyes glowed amber. Scars ran like claw marks across its chest. Then came the second, black as midnight and twice the size. Then the third. The fourth. They moved in a circle, silent. Their snouts lifted. They inhaled. Her scent was a flare in the dark. Fresh blood. Vulnerability. Madness. Prey. Ilyra tried to rise. Her body rebelled. She managed only a slither toward the nearest stone outcropping. Her ankle dragged uselessly behind her, either dislocated or broken. She didn't care which. One of the wolves let out a chuff and the others followed. Then, as one, they pounced. The first hit her like a boulder, knocking the last bit of breath from her lungs. Its fangs clamped down on her shoulder and shook, dragging her back toward the open grave. She screamed, a thin, raw sound that echoed off the hollow's cliffs. She kicked, bit, clawed with what strength remained. Her fingernails tore off in chunks. The second wolf lunged for her calf, its teeth sinking into the meat of her thigh. Her vision exploded in stars. She writhed, punching it with the shattered bones of her hand, but it only snarled and bit down harder. The third went for her neck. She twisted just enough to save her throat. It got her collarbone instead. White-hot pain arced through her skull. She bucked, gasped, thrashed, and in the flailing, her teeth connected with something soft. The first wolf's ear. She bit down. Hard. She didn't let go. She bit through skin, through cartilage, through the scream of the beast, even when blood flooded her mouth and the wolf tried to pull away. She held on like an animal, like a rabid thing, until it tore loose and howled, fleeing. The others hesitated. That gave her just long enough to crawl. She dragged herself with her elbows, smeared in blood, hers, theirs, leaving behind part of her skin on the rock. One wolf followed. It pounced again. She grabbed the ruined corpse of another wolf, half buried by the cliff wall, and rolled it over herself. It landed atop her like a second skin, shielding her. The attacking wolf hesitated. Then it struck. Its teeth sank into the already dead one's belly, ripping flesh in a frenzy. She felt the heat of it over her. And she didn't move. Didn't breathe. Let it mistake her for something already lost. The world tilted. Her vision narrowed. Sound collapsed in on itself. She faded. And for the second time in as many days, she died. Only this time, she didn't stay gone. She woke with something cold pressed to her spine. Wet. Heavy. She blinked. The sky was still there. But it had changed. The clouds had parted. The moon was full, bloated, hanging like an eye without a lid. She lay between three bodies. Wolves. Dead. Torn to pieces. And her. Still breathing. Her dress was gone. Her skin a canvas of wounds. Her hair plastered to her skull with blood and ash. And yet, she felt still. Her bones didn't rattle with fear. Her mind didn't scream. Instead, there was silence. And warmth. Not from the world. From within. Her hand twitched. She pushed herself up. Slowly. So slowly. And when she sat, surrounded by corpses, moonlight struck her eyes. And they glowed. Not gold like thorns. Not wolf amber. Silver. Burning silver. With threads of dark running through them like smoke. Not a full shift. Not yet. But her first step. Her first true step. Ilyra touched her cheek. It came away streaked with blood and something else, black, thick, alive. She looked up at the moon. It wavered. Wobbled. Shrank. Until it looked like a needle. And she smiled. Not from joy. Not from victory. But from the simple, impossible fact that her heart still beat. "I'm still here," she whispered. "I'm still." She didn't finish. Because she didn't need to. The forest around her held its breath. And the wolves stopped howling. Because something had awakened beneath their feet. Chapter 5. The Thing in Her Skin. The wind changed. It smelled like copper and pine, like dying bark and old breath. Ilyra followed it. Her left foot dragged behind her in short jerks, the tendons inside half torn, soaked through with congealed blood. She'd wrapped it with a strip of wool hide flayed from the carcass she'd killed with her teeth, but the pelt was already stiff and black with her leaking life. Her shoulder hung loose, twisted backward, bone grating against socket with each step. She didn't flinch anymore. There was no room left for pain. Only hunger. Her stomach had stopped growling hours ago. It was past that now, beyond need, beyond desire. It had collapsed into a quiet, gaping void. The only way she kept walking was because she hadn't yet fallen. She chewed the meat anyway. Thick. Wet. Gamey with death. She couldn't tell where the dead wolf ended and she began. She didn't care. The moon burned behind her like judgment. She didn't look back. Her gaze fixed forward, toward the dense wall of trees rising from the jagged slope ahead, crimson vines twisted between trunks, glowing faintly in the dark. The bloodvine forest. Even ghosts didn't enter it. She went anyway. Each step sank into the loam, warm and pulpy beneath her soles. The vines moved, slithering like veins over the ground. Some recoiled from her bleeding body. Others reached. A branch caught her jaw. She tore it away. Thorns opened new cuts in her neck. Still, she smiled. It was not the smile of someone victorious, or brave, or sane. It was the smile of something unraveling in the right direction. Her body burned, but she no longer feared the fire. Something was moving beneath her skin. The forest grew tighter the deeper she walked. The air thickened. Not humid, alive. Breathing. Every leaf pulsed to some buried rhythm. Her own heartbeat tried to match it. Her veins shivered with something cold. The trees bent close. The world shrank. And then, a voice. No, not a voice. His voice. Ilyra. She froze. The ground didn't. It pulsed beneath her, and she stumbled, fell to one knee. A root snagged her wrist. A vine looped around her thigh. She reached for the dagger she didn't have. Ilyra, the voice said again, smoother this time, like breath against the back of her neck. She turned. Thorn stood at the edge of the glade, barefoot, shirtless, blood streaked down the middle like some penitent god. His eyes shimmered with something tender. Vulnerable. "I never wanted to lose you." "No," she said hoarsely. "You wanted me buried." "I was afraid." "Of me?" He stepped forward. She didn't. The vines parted for him. They clung tighter to her. He knelt in front of her, head bowed. "Not a wolf. Not an alpha. A man." "Ilyra," he said again, and this time it sounded like her name was breaking him. "Please. Let me be forgiven. Let me be yours again." Her breath caught. The pain in her lungs made her dizzy. "Say you love me," he whispered. "I used to. Say you still do." She tilted her head. The silver in her eyes darkened. Then she reached forward, and her fingers slipped into his chest. The illusion blinked. But not fast enough. Her hand kept going, curling inward, closing around something pulsing and false. Thorn gasped softly, like a child realizing a game had turned into war. "You always knelt so easily," she murmured. Then she yanked. The heart came out with a wet crack. It wasn't flesh. It was a bundle of thorns, black and pulsing with her own blood. It screamed. The forest screamed with it. And the vines moved. They surged up her legs, over her hips, around her ribs. Her spine arched, mouth open, gasping, then choking. The vines wrapped her throat, her arms, her teeth. They didn't strangle. They fused. Her breath was no longer her own. Something inside her howled. She collapsed. Her back slammed against the forest floor, and the vines followed, burrowing into her shoulder, her chest, her spine. It was like being eaten alive, and also like being born again. Every inch of her skin blistered. Every nerve fired at once. The pain came in waves. And then something burst in her chest. Not a bone. Not a lung. Her wolf core. It didn't just stir. It split. Cracked open like a second ribcage inside her. Silver spilled out, not light substance. Viscous. Cold. Ancient. The vines recoiled. But too late. The silver bled into them. Bled into her. And everything changed. Her vision cleared. Her skin reknit. Her lungs drank air like wine. She sat up. Slowly. Around her, the blood vines twisted in agony, shriveling. Her bare skin steamed with leftover magic. Her fingers glowed faintly, silver veins dancing just under the surface. She looked down at her own body. Burned. Broken. Reforged. The girl was gone. Something else sat in her place. She laughed. The sound rasped from her throat, rough and wild. It shook with something like joy. "Of course," she said aloud, voice barely more than a growl. "Of course it had to be this way." She laughed again, and blood ran from her nose, her mouth, her ears. But she didn't wipe it away. "Turns out, you had to destroy me to finish me," she said. "Thank you, Thorn." The forest didn't answer. She didn't need it to. She rose. Her left knee cracked but held. And she walked. The blood vines didn't stop her this time. They parted. They remembered. At the forest's heart, she found it. A shallow clearing. A still pool. No wind disturbed its surface. No life swam beneath. She crouched at the edge. Looked in. Her reflection stared back. Unrecognizable. Her face was a sculpture of bone and blood and madness. Her hair hung in damp strands, silver threaded with red. Her lips were split. Her body barely covered. Her eyes glowed like ghost light. But it wasn't the horror that made her stare. It was the silence. The lack of fear. She was not trembling. Not crying. Not begging for someone to see her. She was watching. Herself. For the first time. And then, from somewhere deep in her chest, it began. A sound. Low. Long. Rising. A howl. It slipped past her lips like smoke at first, then sharpened, caught the air, carved through the trees like a blade. It echoed. Over the deadwoods. Through the open cliffs. Across the mountains she'd crawled from. It was not a song of mourning. It was not a call for help. It was an announcement. She was here. Still here. No longer prey. No longer pack. The wolf had awakened. And she would never be buried again. Chapter 6. The Scar Beneath Her Tongue. The trees opened into stone. Here, deep in the Blavine forest where even light walked softly, Ilyra found the ruins. What had once been a pool, sacred and wide, was now only a hollow crater of dry bone-colored clay. The stone that crowned its center had fractured down the middle, a jagged wound like a scar left by something divine and angry. She limped forward, each step pulling at half-healed skin. Her foot dragged, wrapped in old wool hide, damp with blood and forest filth. Her shoulder throbbed. Her thighs still leaked if she walked too long. But she'd long since made peace with pain. Pain meant she wasn't dead. And she had died, hadn't she? At least once. She knelt at the edge of the ruin, pushing her fingers into the cracked dirt. It came away dry, but there were flecks of ash, pale like crushed bone. She tasted it. Ash of wolves. Old wolves. Forgotten. "I'm not the first to burn," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, worn raw by howling and silence. She liked how it sounded now, like something torn out of the earth rather than born from it. Around her, the stone circle of the old wolf spring glimmered faintly beneath the vines, carvings of lupin shapes locked in war, spirals of claws and teeth etched into stone. An altar lay half-buried under a collapsed arch, choked with roots. She approached it, crawling now, because her leg gave out. And because crawling felt appropriate. The altar was slick with moss. She cleared it with her bare arms, scraping skin, not caring. Beneath the rot was the symbol, the mark of the first shift. It was no mere symbol. It was an invitation. Or a memory. She placed her hand over it. Nothing stirred in her. Her wolf core remained cold, sealed. No shift came. No claws. No hull. Just breath. And bone. And silence. Ilyra let out a harsh laugh. It echoed strangely. "I'm not dead enough yet," she said. Then she picked up a stone shard. It was jagged and dry and cruel-looking, perfect. She rolled back her sleeve. Scars already laced her arms like broken rivers. Some healing, some new. She picked a bare stretch of skin and cut. Blood welled up, thick and darker than it should have been. It dripped onto the altar. Sizzled. She hissed. Her body convulsed, just once. A ripple. Then steadied. It wasn't enough. She carved deeper. Into the muscle. Into the old wound she never spoke of. And as her blood spilled, she whispered names, not words, not prayers. Names of wolves who died beneath the salt rocks. Names of those who screamed in the pit and were never heard. Names of herself. Because she had many. And none. The burning spread down her arm like veins on fire. Her body rejected the blood she bled. It turned black at the edges, sizzling against her skin. Some of it spat back at her face. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Looked down. The cut she'd made. It was rotting. Not just bleeding, breaking down. Her flesh blistered, turned gray at the edges. A rancid smell rose. "No," she murmured, voice breaking. "Not like this." But the infection was inside her. She fell back, panting. The world spun. Her fingers clawed at her chest, where her core should be. Cold. Empty. Silent. Her body trembled, locked between shapes. She couldn't shift. She wasn't human. She wasn't wolf. Just a thing stuck between. She turned her face to the ground, ball rising in her throat. And screamed. The sound cracked the quiet. Birds fled. Vines recoiled. She curled onto her side. Everything throbbed. Even her teeth hurt. She bit her own tongue. Hard. Not in defiance. In desperation. She didn't stop until she tasted more blood. Until her mouth filled with it. Then, She felt it. A flare of numbness beneath her tongue. Not pain. The absence of it. She froze. Her fingers shook as she reached into her mouth, lifting her tongue with trembling nails. And saw it. A scar. No, not a scar. A mark. Bone-colored. Pale against the flesh. Like something branded beneath the skin. It pulsed once. Her vision doubled. Then split. She gasped because she saw through it. Not with her eyes. But with something else. She saw what the trees saw. The world tilted. Then narrowed. She saw the ruin, glowing in a spectrum she didn't know existed. She saw shadows moving. Wolves long dead, crouched in the stone. Watching her. And then. It stopped. The vision dropped. She fell back, coughing blood, shaking. And laughing. The scar beneath her tongue faded to stillness. But she felt it. A tether. A bite of clarity through madness. Only pain makes it real, she whispered, blood dripping down her chin. Her limbs ached. Her back felt skinned. Her shoulders spasmed. But she sat up. Searched her torn pack for anything, thread, bone needle, forest sinew. She found a broken strap and some crude cord. It would do. She stitched the cut on her arm with her own teeth, clenching the thread tight. Her hands didn't shake anymore. She was beyond shaking. Every tug of the thread was a promise. Every stab of pain was a reason. You thought you buried me, she said aloud, to the ruins, to the ghosts, to the sky. But I rot slower than you hoped. She bit off the thread. Spat it out. Try harder. The wind picked up. Not wind. A cry. Far, but not distant enough. A howl, but distorted. Ripped at the edges. Like a voice that had screamed too long. Ilyra turned her head. Listened. It came again. Wild. Fractured. Wrong. Not from a wolf. Not quite. But she understood it. Alpha's blood. Flow to the pit. Cleanse. Burn. She blinked. Sat still. The scar beneath her tongue throbbed once. And she understood. Not just the words. The command behind them. It wasn't meant for her. But she heard it anyway. And it was about him. Thorn. She stood slowly. Her knee locked but held. Her fingers found the stone shard again. She slid it into a loop at her waist. The ruins were silent now. The ghosts waiting. Let's see who gets buried this time, she whispered. She turned toward the sound of the mad howl. And walked back toward the mouth of the world that had once swallowed her. Chapter 7. The Bone Wall Pact. Ash still clung to the air. Ilyra stood just beyond the curve of the bone wall, where the wind didn't reach and the sky forgot to look down. Her fingers were caked in dried blood, both hers and Not. Her nails had split. Her clothes had long fused with dirt and crusted gore. The bones greeted her like a cathedral's gate. They rose crooked from the stone earth, a twisted crown of ribs, femurs, shattered skulls and vertebrae, all fused into a grotesque archwolves had died here for generations. This was the place they left behind the parts no one wanted to bury. She touched one, a jawbone with only one tooth left, and it rattled faintly. Closer, something moved. She narrowed her eyes. 3 wolves. Not ghosts. Not fully alive, either. Their ribs jutted through patchy fur. Their eyes were milky with madness. One limped, dragging a hind leg like an afterthought. Another had dried blood around its maw and no discernible tongue. The third crouched low, snarling at shadows. They didn't see her. Not yet. They were forgotten things. Like she had been. Left to rot under the sun, too broken to be worth killing. She didn't pity them. She envied them. They had survived. So had she. Now she'd learn how to live like them. She stepped out from the stone. The wolves turned. All at once. They didn't hesitate. They charged. The first reached her in 4 strides, lunging teeth first. She let it hit her. The force knocked her back into bone. Pain laced through her shoulder as she slammed against the wall. The second wolf went for her side. The third circled, silent and low, eyes unblinking. Ilyra rolled as the second lunged. Its teeth caught her arm, tearing cloth and skin in a single snap. She didn't scream. Instead, she laughed. It was a cracked sound, joyless and sharp, but it was hers. She twisted, brought her elbow down on its snout. Bone cracked. It whined and staggered back. The first was already circling again. The third came now, swift and too quiet. She met it with her own teeth. She bit its ear. Hard. Drew blood. It yelped, more in confusion than pain, and backed off. She stood. Bleeding. Heaving. Alive. Her limbs shook, but she stayed upright. The wolves watched. She growled, a low, guttural sound pulled from the deepest part of her throat. The wolves stilled. Then lunged again. She welcomed it. She fought them not to win, but to feel. To burn the last of her softness away. Her fingers dug into fur. Her mouth split with a snarl. She threw herself into the dirt and bones, rolling, twisting, letting pain be her teacher. When her vision blurred, she didn't stop. When her knees buckled, she crawled. When her breath came ragged, she smiled. Because it meant she was learning. They didn't kill her. They couldn't. They tried. Again and again. And every time, she stood up. When the wolves finally drew back, panting, bloodied, limping, they watched her like they weren't sure anymore who the prey was. She stepped toward the largest, the one with the missing tongue, and raised her hands slowly. It growled. She knelt. And began to build. Bone by bone. She took a shattered femur from the wall. A clean scapula. 2 teeth. Arranged them in a circle. A crude glyph. Old wolf language remembered from the stone ruins. Not a spell, not magic. A command. A reminder. She carved a line through her palm with a shard of rib. Let her blood drip into the center of the circle. The wolves watched. The air changed. No wind. Just breath. The glyph pulsed. She didn't speak it, she became it. The largest wolf stepped forward. Snarled. Then lunged. Not at her throat. At her arm. Its teeth sank into her bicep. She didn't fight. She let it. The pain was blinding. White hot. It tore through her nerves like lightning. She didn't cry out. But her body collapsed. The wolf held its bite. Not tearing, holding. Claiming. When it released her, her skin was shredded. She fell backward, breath gone, body numb. And passed out. When she woke, it was night. Her arm throbbed like it had been set on fire. She sat up slowly. The wolves lay around her. Not close. Not far. Watchful. She looked down at her arm. The wound had scabbed over in the shape of a crescent. A mark. A pact. Not a mate bond. Something older. Something darker. She didn't own the wolves. They obeyed. For now. She looked up. Laughed. Laughed so hard she nearly choked. You see it now, Thorn? She rasped between hysterics. I don't need your chains. I don't need your mercy. I don't need you. Her throat burned. Tears slipped from her eyes, not of sorrow, but of something more violent. I make monsters kneel. The wolves did not move. But their ears turned toward her. Good. She stood. Blood smeared her legs, her ribs, her jaw. She walked to the edge of the bone wall. The part where it curved inward, where old warriors once made vows before being cast down. She crouched. Dipped 2 fingers in the blood on her arm. Wrote. 3 words, shaky but deliberate, across the pale stone. Luna is not dead. She stared at it. Then stepped back. The glyph behind her pulsed faintly. The wolves shifted. And her breath caught. There. A flicker in the air. A scent. Familiar. Burnt pine. Iron. Cold ash. Thorn. She turned, eyes wild. Nothing there. But he had been. She could feel it. He had stood on the ridge. He had checked. To see if she was dead. She smiled. A small, poisonous thing. Next time, she whispered, "Come closer." She walked back to the wolves. And they followed. Chapter 8, Feast of Teeth and Fire. The scent of prey came on the wind, sharp, metallic, laced with salt and fear. Ilyra didn't smile. She breathed it. The trees at the edge of Blackthorn Ridge were gnarled things, thick with moss and bone vine, whispering to the dark like old soldiers muttering about wars they'd never forget. Moonlight didn't quite reach here, but the stars pulsed behind the clouds like a heartbeat beneath scarred skin. She crouched low in the underbrush, her fingers curled in the dirt, eyes locked on the clearing ahead. 2 wolves. Moonborn. Scout rank. Younger than Thorn's core fighters, but trained. Proud. Clean-blooded. They moved in tight formation, one circling wide, the other holding center. Too loud in the leaves, too certain in their scent dominance. They thought the land still belonged to them. They didn't smell the decay underneath the ferns. They didn't know what she'd made of the broken. Her wolves, the remains, shifted like shadows behind her. No words passed between them. They didn't need speech to understand what she wanted. Her glyph mark still throbbed on her arm where the largest had bitten her days ago, sealing the pact in her blood. She gave a silent nod. The wolves scattered. The plan was simple. Deceive. Divide. Devour. She took the long route, south curve, near the rotted log, and stepped into open air. Let them see her. Let her silhouette flash silver under the starlight. The younger of the scouts caught her first. A snarl cracked from his throat, alerting his partner. They surged toward her as one, fangs bared, claws unsheathed. She ran. Not far. Just enough. She led them past the broken root line, past the mud slick stone, into the clearing marked by bloodweed. Then she stopped. They didn't. The first scout lunged, expecting flight. Instead, she turned. The impact caught him off guard. She grabbed his fur mid-leap, twisted, slammed him into the ground with her full weight. He howled, cut short when her elbow cracked against his windpipe. His brother was already upon her, jaws closing in. But teeth met fur and nothing else. A shadow barreled from the left, a gnarled wolf, hunched and snarling, crashing into the second scout with all the madness of the cast out. It bit low at the belly, tore upward. The scout screamed. Not for help. Just in pain. The first tried to rise. She caught him by the scruff and smashed his head against the roots. Not enough to kill. Just enough to daze. Her fingers worked fast, yanking the reinforced armor straps from his shoulders. She'd never liked the Moonpack's silver-plated leather. Too polished. Too smug. Her knife found the seam beneath his shoulder blade. The howl that came from him then was real. She stripped the fur carefully, with an old hunter's grace. Not out of cruelty. Out of ritual. She had no shrine. No altar. No gods. Only rage. The pelt came away damp, steaming in the night air. She lifted it high, just as another of her wolves dragged the second scout's limp body toward the bone tree. She followed. The tree stood like a monument in the dead center of the eclipsed grounds, its roots sunken in old blood, its limbs coiled with rusted relics and half-eaten charms. The place where old ones had once spoken to stars. She stuffed the first corpse beneath the roots. Hung the stripped pelt on the lowest bough. Then she turned to the second body. Still breathing. Barely. He blinked up at her, mouth ruined, eyes wide. She leaned close. "You thought we were gone," she whispered. "You thought ashes were safe to walk on." She placed the torch in his hands. Lit it. Stepped back. Let him burn his brother's totem. He didn't scream. He just watched it catch. The fire bloomed, slow at first, licking the edges of the silver plate, then roaring upward as the oiled leather caught. Flames danced across the clearing, painting the branches red, gold, bloody orange. The wolves gathered silent. One howled, then another, then all of them. It wasn't melody. It wasn't a song. It was announcement. A declaration. They no longer waited in shadow. Ilyra stared into the blaze. The heat licked her cheeks. Her arms were flecked with soot. Her clothes hung in tatters, fur matted, blood caked. She was starving. She was tired. She had never felt more alive. She closed her eyes. "They'll forget Luna," she murmured, barely audible over the howls. "But they'll remember the woman who walked out of the fire." A wind rose, carried ash up the ridgeline, across Blackthorn's forest, up toward the old watchtower ruins where Thorn's moon scouts had once stood, where messengers still passed. She didn't need to deliver a threat. She'd written it in smoke. Far away, beyond the ridge, beyond the vale, Thorn stood in the old stone lookout. His hand hovered above the message board, where scent-stamped parchments arrived via raven wolves. This one was different. It came not with a letter, but a smell. Burnt leather. Singed wolf hair. Copper and blood. An old sentinel narrowed his eyes, kneeling beside him. "Fire near the eclipsed grounds," he said. "Scout armor was found near the bone tree." Thorn didn't answer. The elder sniffed again. Whoever did it knew what they were saying. Thorn's jaw clenched. But his voice was calm. "Send the moon scent. Double line. No banners. No light. And if they find a body?" Thorn's gaze turned toward the distant horizon, toward the fire still staining the stars. "Then someone's speaking a language we thought was dead." Back in the forest, Ilyra sat against the scorched bark of the sacrifice tree, watching embers drift like silver spores. The corpse had long since stopped twitching. She didn't care. She wasn't here for the kill. She was here for the message. And for the first time, she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was asking. No, demanding. For memory. For blood. For reckoning. The wolves gathered around her, not quite tame, not quite mad. Her wolves. Her fire. Her war. And in her bones, something old unfurled its wings. A hunger not for flesh, but for witness. The world would look at the ashes and see what she had become. And they would answer. Chapter 9. The Carved Names. The ruins slept beneath a cloak of dust and broken moonlight, untouched by time but never truly silent. Blackstone crowned the ridge like a forgotten tomb, its arches collapsed, walls choked with ivy, the bone-white columns fractured like ribs around an ancient heart. Once a royal temple, now a graveyard for names that no one dared speak aloud. But she remembered. Ilyra moved like shadow through the stones, barefoot and blood-marked, her fingers trailing along old carvings that pulsed faintly beneath her touch. The air here was different, thicker, slower, as if memory itself had weight. She stepped into the inner chamber. At the center stood the slab, the memory stone. It was nothing more than a chunk of obsidian veined with silver, sunken into a nest of dried vines and half-rotted feathers. But its surface shimmered faintly when she approached. It responded not to prayers, but to pain. She dropped to her knees, opened the gash on her palm with a sharpened fong, and bled. The stone drank her offering eagerly, hissing as the blood seeped into its grooves. Symbols awakened, one by one, Luna marks long buried, long forgotten. The chamber filled with the scent of wet earth and burning fur. Then the visions came. Not gentle, not slow. The first Luna stood tall, her hands bound, her eyes silver with fury. Flames crackled at her feet. A circle of cloaked figures surrounded her, chanting. One of them raised a ceremonial blade. She did not scream when they opened her throat. The second vision followed, another Luna, this one younger. Stripped bare, her back lashed open, her body draped across the moon altar. She whispered something to the wind before the stone below her began to drink. Her last word was a name, Thorn. Then came the third, Cora. Ilyra's heart stuttered. The vision was softer now. A younger Cora, long before the madness had set in, stood in the snow, her cloak torn, hands painted in her own blood. She reached out not toward death, but toward Ilyra. Her lips moved. Not a curse. A blessing. But Ilyra could not hear it. The vision shattered. She screamed, soundless, teeth bared, blood misting her breath. I see you, she whispered to the dark. I carry all of you. Then, with the tip of her bone dagger, she began to carve. One name after another etched into the obsidian, white stone curling beneath her blade. Nearest. Kevin. Thorn. Thorn's mother. The warden. She didn't pause. Each name pressed deeper than the last, the letters jagged and ugly, like a child's curse scrawled in a fit of rage. Her hand trembled. Her lips moved in rhythm with the knife. I name you. I curse you. I bury you before you're dead. The shadows thickened. Smoke coiled from the memory stone. And then he came. Not real. Not present. But she felt him. Thorn stepped from the dark of her mind, half lit, as if caught between firelight and nightmare. His face was the one she'd once touched. His voice the one that once made her tremble. But now it was low, broken. You being alive, he whispered, makes everything filthier. She smiled, lips split with dried blood. Then throw me into your sacred blood, she murmured, and let me stain your lineage. His face twisted. He opened his mouth to speak again, but her laughter broke across the silence like a whip. Not human laughter. Not entirely. A sound with no civility left in it. Too sharp. Too loud. Wild. She clawed the rest of the names into the stone until her fingers bled. The memory stone pulsed beneath her, drinking every syllable. Then she did something none of the old Lunas had done. She took a shard of the stone itself, still wet with her blood, and pressed it into the hilt of her wolf-bone dagger. Flesh hissed. Magic caught. The blade drank. Her first spirit weapon. Not blessed. Infested. It pulsed faintly in her palm like a newborn heart. The chamber fell silent again, save for the whisper of wind through ruined stone. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes gleamed like frost over fresh kills. She rose. Not Luna. Not girl. Not wolf. Something else. Something they'd tried to break, but only ever unleashed. The palace at Moonspire glistened with frost and pearl. White banners hung from the high towers, sewn with silver thread sigils of union, purity, destiny. It made her want to retch. Ilyra stood beneath the floor grates of the outer gallery, pressed against the carved stone, her scent masked with ash and copper. Her gaze rose through the cracks, clear enough to see the torchlit hall above. The crowd had not yet gathered. But he was there. Thorn. Tall. Composed. Wrapped in a ceremonial cloak trimmed with royal fur and blackened glass. He held something delicate in his hands, a bridal robe, sheer and soft, embroidered with the 3 rings of Luna-bound union. She saw Nearest approach, smiling. Not at Thorn. At what he meant. Ilyra didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She didn't even breathe. As Thorn lifted the robe and placed it across Nearest's shoulders, something old curled inside Ilyra's chest, but it wasn't grief. It wasn't rage. It was hunger. She pressed a hand to her dagger. The memory stone pulsed once in its hilt. Below the celebration, in the shadows, her lips moved. But no sound came. Only a whisper, too soft for the gods to hear. Next time, she'll wear it in her grave. Chapter 10. The Howl That Breaks the Silence. The moon hung unnaturally low that night, bloated, pale, and watching. Ilyra stood barefoot in the undergrowth behind the Mooncrest Temple, the hem of her cloak soaked in damp moss and cinder. Around her, the woods were deathly still. The trees leaned in, gnarled and ancient, as if they too waited for something unholy to rise. She held a jawbone in one hand, a femur in the other. The ribs she'd already arranged, curved in a crude, almost ceremonial arc, were bleached, gnawed, and still faintly warm from where she'd torn them free. She worked in silence. One by one, the bones slotted together, not in the shape of a circle, but of something broken. Inverted. Violent. The reverse Luna mark. It bore no blessing, no symmetry, no peace. When it was done, she lifted the ribcage altar and dragged it to the old moon gate, once the sacred threshold between priesthood and beast, now little more than polished stone carved with sigils that meant nothing to her anymore. She slammed the mark onto the gate's lintel with her own fist, the sharp edge of femur cracking against marble. Blood spattered. She didn't flinch. Above her, the stars seemed to recoil. Then she breathed. Once, twice, and then she howled. It wasn't a sound the trees had heard before. It didn't rise like a question or fall like a cry. It tore from her chest like the memory of murder, hoarse, ragged, wild. It was rage. It was grief. It was an invocation. And it didn't stop. Her voice cracked, shifted, then changed into something else. A second tone buried beneath the first, not hers. Not human. A deeper resonance, one pulled from the marrow of the dead wolves she had claimed. The sound split through the trees. Birds fled their roosts in a chaotic flutter. Distant packs whined, turned tail, and vanished into the mountains. And in the silver chamber of Mooncrest Temple, just beyond the wood's edge, Nearest sat bolt upright in bed. Sweat clung to her spine. The room was still, but her heart drummed like thunder. She looked toward the ceremonial gown laid out for her on the far chair. It was perfect. Except now it wasn't. Her breath hitched. There, along the inner hem of the white silk, ran a thin, crooked seam. Red. Threaded by hand. With blood. She didn't scream. She didn't move. But her hands clenched in the folds of her sheet. She knew. Ilyra had returned. Not for mercy. Not for reclaiming. But for ruin. Back in the woods, Ilyra dropped to her knees. The howl had emptied her lungs. Her ribs ached, throat raw, ears ringing with the silence left in its wake. Then she laughed. Sharp and shaking. There was no echo this time. Just the memory of her own madness, crawling up the inside of her skull like a second soul. They'll call it unnatural, she rasped to no one, to everything. They'll say I broke the rules. She smiled. Blood dripped down her chin. I did. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, still trembling, and whispered into the wind. Good. High above the forest floor, nestled in the crook of a black pine, Ilyra crouched, hidden in the shadows of tangled limbs. The night had thickened, as if the moonlight itself was afraid to reach her. Below, the underbrush rustled. Footsteps. She did not move. Closer. He stepped into the clearing. Thorn. Unarmed. Unmasked. His cloak brushed the ground as he walked toward the moon gate, where her inverted bone mark still hung like a corpse's crown. The firelight from the torches behind him flickered off his hair, catching the silver strands at his temples. He stopped in front of the gate, stared at what she'd left. She could see him stiffen. She could almost hear the calculations behind his silence. How long ago had it been hung? How fresh was the blood? How many bones had been used? He didn't reach for it. Didn't call for guards. He simply looked. And in that moment, the thorn she remembered, the one who had kissed her like a secret and marked her like a sentence, was gone. All that remained was a shell wearing his name. But she didn't grieve. She didn't even blink. From above, she whispered, just loud enough for the wind to carry. You should have burned me 3 days ago. He turned sharply, gaze scanning the trees. But she was already gone, slipping through the canopy like breath, scent masked, presence vanished. Just like she had learned. Just like the dead had taught her. Back in the temple, Nearest sat before her mirror, robe draped across her lap like a corpse's shroud. She was stitching. Unpicking. And then stitching again. Not because she had to, but because the blood thread called to her in a way she didn't understand. She had never feared Ilyra, not when she'd vanished, not when the ashes cooled. But now she felt it. This wasn't resurrection. It was retribution. And every shadow in the temple held the thread of teeth. Chapter 11. The Night the Luna Bled. The gown fit too tightly. Nearest sat in front of the gilded mirror, breath shallow, fingers twitching in her lap. The moonlight dripped through the stained glass above her like frozen silver blood, pooling at her feet, turning everything white. Too white. Her reflection shimmered slightly. A tremble she blamed on nerves. But the pulse in her throat wouldn't settle. The dress was perfect, woven with light blessed silk and stitched by seers who could recite every line of the old hymn in their sleep. Every hem, every fold, had been anointed in river salt and ash petal oil. The veil alone had taken 3 weeks of consecrated threading. And yet, her skin itched beneath it. Crawled. Like it recognized a cage. Like something was watching. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. Her breath fogged the mirror. Her voice did not convince even herself. Then came the sting. It started beneath her ribs, a low, searing pressure, as if something clawed against her bones. She clutched the edge of the table, knocking over a vial of perfumed resin. It shattered, the scent turning sour the moment it touched the air. The ache spread. Down her spine. Into her palms. Her gums ached, her canines pressed sharp against her tongue. No, not now. And then, behind her, in the mirror, white, a pale silhouette. A woman, barefoot, blood-slicked, clothed in a wedding gown stained from hem to collarbone. Her hair hung in wet, dark clumps. Her hands were painted red. Her eyes were not eyes. They were voids. Nearest turned. There was no one. Only silence. But the floor was damp. She looked down. Beneath her, a pool of blood. It seeped from nowhere. Crawled toward her feet. She screamed. The doors of Moonspire thundered open. Inside, the great wedding hall stood hushed beneath the weight of ceremony. Every wool-blood noble, every elder, every acolyte of the old rites turned in their seats. Thorn stood beside the altar, hands folded, lips pressed thin. Cavan shifted beside him, brows already furrowed. "She's late. She'll come," Thorn muttered. He wasn't sure if it was hope or dread that knotted in his throat. The sacred horns blared once more. Then, a shriek. Not the kind that came from ceremony. Not the joy cry of a new Luna. A scream. The doors slammed again, this time from within. And there she was. Nearest. Stumbling down the aisle. Dress torn, veil discarded. Eyes wild. "She's alive," she gasped, voice cracking. "She's alive. You told me she was dead." Whispers erupted. Elders leaned forward. Some rose to their feet. Nearest spun in a half-circle, clawing at her chest. Her voice rose to a fever pitch, pointing toward the shadows beyond the altar. "She's standing right there. She's watching me." There was nothing. Only the burn of 1,000 confused eyes. "She's bleeding," Nearest wept. "The floor, there's blood all over the floor." A silence followed. Heavy. Deadly. And then came the sound no Luna should ever make. Fabric ripping. She tore at the sacred gown. The delicate lace shrieked as her hands shredded it from her body, baring skin, exposing bruises that had never existed. She crumpled to the ground, sobbing, trembling, her dignity unraveling before the gods and the wolves alike. Thorn moved. Too late. She was already surrounded by attendants, elders, priests who did not speak, who only looked and remembered. There had been another once, a girl in white, a Luna who had walked this same aisle and burned. Beneath the temple, in the bone-cold catacombs that even sunlight dared not touch, Ilyra walked alone. Her steps echoed through stone corridors, passing by burial walls carved with names long erased. Her breath fogged in front of her. The silence was not peaceful. It was sacred. And she did not belong here. She didn't care. When she reached the central spine of the underground, she dipped her fingers into the pouch at her hip. Wolf blood. Still warm. Still hers. She crouched. dragged her fingers across the wall. One word at a time. Not your Luna. She dipped again. Not his either. The blood ran slowly down the ancient stone, blackened by the dark. She leaned back, studied the crude letters, then smiled. It wasn't satisfaction. It was certainty. She did not need to destroy Nereus. She only needed to unmake her. The rest, she knew, would come crumbling down. Upstairs, Nereus was dragged behind gold-lined curtains. The ceremony halted. The guests hushed into confusion, into scandal, into fear. Thorn stood frozen at the center of the altar. A trickle of sweat ran down his spine. He hadn't seen her. Of course not. But the moment Nereus screamed, he had heard her name echo in the deepest part of his skull. And in the silence that followed, something else returned. A sound. A whisper. You should have burned me when you had the chance. His jaw clenched. He turned toward the back of the chamber, searching shadows for a figure that did not wait to be seen. Nothing. But he knew. He knew. In the high tower of the moon's spire, Cavan paced with heavy boots. Behind him, 3 of the elders sat in grim silence. She's unraveling, one said. Possessed, another muttered. Or cursed. Cavan shook his head. No curse. Just guilt. Just truth. He turned, face drawn tight with lines of age and war. We may need to dig again. One elder flinched. The crypt's been sealed. By right. Then unseal it. Why? The youngest asked. You think something escaped? Cavan stared at the flame of the wall sconce. No, he said quietly. I think her soul never left. Far above, on the temple's tallest tower, Thorn sat alone. He didn't speak. Didn't move. But the silence no longer comforted him. It crackled. Like teeth behind velvet. And then, just as the wind touched his ear, a voice. You could have been mine. His breath caught. He did not answer. Because part of him wished he had. Chapter 12. The Wolves Without Names. The forest here had no song. No birds. No wind. No moonlight brave enough to break the thorns. Ilyra stepped lightly over frost-slick roots, her boots soundless against the mulch of leaves and bone. The cold wrapped around her wrists like prayer ropes, tight, burning, intimate. But it wasn't the cold that made her breath pause in her throat. It was them. 5 shadows. Low to the ground. Watching. Their eyes gleamed faintly in the dark, amber, green, one nearly white. Their fur was mottled with old blood and brambles, their ribs visible even through the thickness of winter coats. Not wildlings. Not deranged rogues. But not tame either. Exiled. Wolves without packs, without protection. Without names. And yet, none of them bared their teeth. Not yet. She crouched, eyes steady. Her cloak rustled slightly, the weight of dried blood in its hem catching on the brush. Then she extended her arm. Palm down. Fingers bent. The posture of command. They stilled. Then the largest, brindle, one ear torn, with a limp in his left foreleg, took a step forward. He sniffed the air, low and slow. The others waited. Their instincts humming beneath the surface like drums before war. I'm not your Luna, she whispered, though no human tongue should have been able to speak in that moment. They understood. She could see it in the twitch of tails, in the breath that caught in their chests. I'm the thing they buried. No growl came. Only silence. Then she reached into the satchel slung across her hip and pulled free a length of red-dyed hide. Still warm. Still laced with the scent of the moonspire's sacred herbs. The brindle wolf sniffed it. His lip curled. Good. She dropped the hide between them. Smell that, she murmured. That's the one they chose. His Luna. His perfect, silken bride. Another wolf crept forward. Smaller. Lighter on her paws. Her nose brushed the offering, then her ears flattened. That scent leads to the edge, Ilyra said, eyes flicking toward the northern ridge where the lights of the border village blinked faintly through the trees. Hunt it. Make them feel it. She didn't need to say more. The wolves knew hunger. They also knew betrayal. And tonight, she would give them both. The border village had once been a hunting outpost. Now it was little more than splinters and ash. The first howl came at twilight, low and mournful, almost feminine. The guards leaned out from their wooden watchposts, blinking into the forest with narrowed eyes. They never saw the teeth. Ilyra did. From a ledge overlooking the village, she watched as the wolves descended. Not with the frenzy of madness. Not the erratic tearing of rabid beasts. But with strategy. They flanked. They herded. They killed only those who resisted. The rest, mothers, children, slow-moving men, were left untouched, left trembling, left alive enough to speak. One of the guards tried to run. He made it as far as the tree lean before the brindle wolf caught him by the leg and dragged him screaming into the dark. By the time the fires began to catch, the pack had already disappeared. All except one. Ilyra waited until the screams quieted into choking sobs. Then she stood, cradling the weathered skull of an old forest wolf in her hands. She knelt beside the village's shattered shrine, a stone bowl crusted with soot and old wax, meant for prayers, now split and scorched. She placed the skull gently inside. Then, from her sleeve, she drew a scrap of cloth, white silk, blood-spattered, frayed with teeth marks. Her mark had been burned into the center with a silver brand, the inverted Luna crest, scarred down the center like a split throat. She tucked it into the hollow of the skull. Whispers ran through the cold like a prayer. She said nothing, but her presence sang. Let them find it. Let them wonder. Let them blame the girl who bore his mark. By morning, the whispers had turned to outcries. She was seen, someone said, in a cloak made of wolfskin. A howl broke the trees. Every dog in the eastern burrows tried to escape its leash. She led them. She did this. But no one said her name. Not yet. They were still too afraid. Still too uncertain. In the Munspire's great hall, Thorn stood over the half-burnt skull delivered to the offering pool. Water still dripped from its teeth. His jaw tightened. Nearest trembled beside him, her gaze flicking to the branded cloth, her fingers clutching at the sleeve of his robe. She's trying to destroy us, she whispered. She wants to ruin our bond. She's obsessed. No, he said. One word. Cold. Cutting. Then quieter. She doesn't care about you. Nearest blinked. What? Thorn stepped back, eyes narrowed at the symbol carved into the cloth. His thumb traced the inverted crescent, the slash through its heart. She's not after you. Or me. Then who? Everything, he growled. She wants to burn everything. That night, the hunters sent to track the wolves did not return. Not whole. Only one came crawling back to the gate. Clothes shredded. Eyes wide. One arm twisted at the wrong angle. He collapsed before the guards. And when he could finally speak, he said only this. That wasn't a pack. He shook, sobs catching in his throat. They moved like soldiers. They had orders. In the dense trees beyond the border, Ilyra crouched beside the wolves. The fires behind them still glowed faintly through the branches. She did not pet them. Did not praise. She only watched. Her reflection shimmered in the amber eyes of the pack. Not Alpha. Not Luna. Not kin. But something they understood. Something older. Something earned. Let them look into your eyes, she said, and see what they refuse to teach you. The brindle wolf licked the blood from his paw. The others huffed in quiet agreement. She rose. Snow had begun to fall, silent, delicate, a soft hush after the screams. She let it melt against her skin. You know what they call you? She asked softly. Monsters. No answer. But monsters follow rules. Even wolves do. She turned her head, just enough to catch the glow of the Munspire's torch-lit peaks in the distance. Let's see what they follow. And with that, she stepped back into the shadows. Silent. Smiling. Not a ghost. Not a Luna. But a storm. And this time, she had teeth. Chapter 13. Moon cracks the Alpha's mind. The moon rose like a wound that would not heal, too full, too close, too watchful. Inside the Alpha's chamber, silence pressed against the carved stone walls, heavy as velvet and twice as suffocating. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long shadows that writhed like spirits across the floor. Thorn did not sleep. Not truly. His body lay prone beneath furs, sweat glistening on his collarbones, jaw clenched tight. But his mind wandered, dragged rather, into a place he no longer dared name. The lake was still. He stood at its edge again, boots submerged in the icy shallows, and she was there. Not as she had last looked, bloodied, broken, mouth sewn shut by the laws she'd shattered, but as she had been before. Ilyra. Barefoot, cloaked in silver light, eyes sharp with laughter. She offered her hand. He remembered this. The first time the bond had cracked open between them, not in bed, not in battle, but by touch. A simple clasp of fingers, and something ancient had roared to life between their souls. She had not flinched. He had. Her palm pressed to his, warm and steady. "Do you feel it?" she'd asked. He had. God's help him, he had. And now, "Do you still feel it?" the dream Ilyra whispered. He tried to answer, but his throat burned. He looked down. His hands were empty. Blood dripped from his nose. Thick. Dark. Soaking into the lake's mirrored surface. He staggered back, gasping. And the lake swallowed her whole. He woke with a jolt, air seizing in his lungs. His skin was damp with sweat, the sheets twisted around his waist like chains. The cold of the room didn't touch him, his body burned. Feverish. Pulsing with something hot and aching that throbbed behind his eyes. A knock scraped the door. "Don't," he growled, voice raw. But the door creaked anyway. Nearest stepped inside, candle in hand, dressed in sheer nightgown and concern. "Thorn, it's the third night. You're not eating. You're burning up. Let me leave." She halted mid-step. He sat up, wincing as blood trickled from his nose again. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, smearing red across his jaw. Neris's voice trembled. "This isn't just illness. It's her, isn't it?" His gaze snapped to her. "You smell her," she whispered. "Even now." "I said leave. She's dead." Neris's voice pitched up. "You buried her. I helped you cleanse the bond. The elders." "It wasn't cleansed," he hissed. She flinched. He rose from the bed, every muscle stiff with suppressed tremor. His skin flushed, too hot to bear, and yet the moment he passed near her, he recoiled. Her scent grated. Wrong. Off. Not her. Not Ilyra. He pressed a palm to the stone wall, breathing ragged. "I feel her," he murmured. "In here." He tapped his chest, then his temple. "In the bones." Neris stepped forward again, carefully. "You're sick. The fever is making you hallucinate," Elder Cavan said. He spun on her, eyes blazing. He said she was gone. The candle wavered in her hands. "I smell salt," Thorn muttered. "Rain on stone. Blood and crushed lavender. And every time I close my eyes." His voice fractured. Neris tried again, gentler this time. "She's not real anymore." He looked at her, something strange and distant filling his stare. "Then why," he whispered, "does she feel more real than you?" By dawn, the fever had worsened. He didn't eat. Didn't speak. Servants said they heard him growling in sleep, clawing at the walls. By nightfall, he shattered the silver circlet crafted for his wedding. He did not apologize. When Neris came with a healer, he threw the man out. "Poison," he spat. "Your cures dull her voice." "What voice?" Neris cried. "What voice are you even hearing?" He smiled, dazed. "She sings." In the ceremony hall below, Elder Cavan lit incense alone, muttering incantations that had not been spoken in a generation. The air grew thick with wolf ash and ground bone. His hands trembled as he unwrapped the relic he had once sworn never to use again. A soul burner. old as the first moon. He stared into the coals. Is it possible, he murmured to the empty chamber, that she bound herself through death? The coals pulsed. A whisper echoed, soft and inhuman, yes. He flinched. She marked him before the bond was broken. I performed the rite. I severed it. Not all ties bleed from the wrist. The flames flared briefly, then fell still. He wiped his brow, heart thudding. The Luna had not died. Not entirely. Something of her scent, soul, vengeance still lingered. And it was infecting the Alpha. Later that night, in the marble hallway near the eastern spire, Nereus met him in secret. Her cloak was fur-lined, her steps rushed. He did not rise to greet her. You promised me, she said, voice strained. When I agreed to take her place. When I agreed to bear the mark meant for her. You said the erasure would be complete. Kevin glanced at her, eyes shadowed. I was wrong. Nereus's jaw clenched. He still feels her, she hissed. She haunts him. She is still controlling him. Kevin's silence was answer enough. She stepped closer, desperate. The ritual, you said it would cleanse his soul. I said it would mute the bond, he corrected. I never promised it would kill her reach. Nereus's hands trembled. Then what do we do? He turned toward the inner sanctum, where Thorn now lay in fever, trembling beneath moon-soaked windows. I need to speak with the dead. Her breath hitched. I need to ask her what she wants. High above, in the tower chamber, Thorn lay motionless. The fever burned hotter. But the scent remained. Lavender. Salt. Ash. And the sound of her voice curled in his skull like smoke from an old fire. You should have burned me, she whispered. He opened his eyes. Tears leaked down his temples, unbidden. You should have kept me. Her laughter rang. It did not stop. Chapter 14. The Scar is a Weapon. The wind carried a low howl through the broken teeth of the old barracks. Once, this had been Thorn's forward camp, a proud outpost carved into the ridge of the Blackthorn Mountains, manned by his most ruthless iron fangs. Now it was rot and rust. Moss devoured the stones. Iron hooks swung from splintered beams like nooses. Bloodstains soaked the dirt where wolves had once knelt to receive war marks. And now one knelt again. Ilyra stood over him, her shadow long in the firelight. Her hands were bare, pale, slick with blood to the elbows. He was broad, mountain-born, the kind of brute who'd once been proud to serve at Thorn's right hand. Now his mouth was gagged with bone. Literally. A white shard of femur had been wedged between his jaws, carved with ancient runes and bound with braided sinew. Blood dripped from the corners of his lips as the spell took hold. Ilyra crouched before him. Do you know what this is? The man's eyes burned with hatred, but his body trembled. She tapped the edge of the bone with a blackened fingernail. Corpse seal. Old magic. Forgotten by your kind. It ties your tongue to your throat, and your throat to your will. Speak against me, and your own voice will strangle you. He tried to spit. She smiled, slow and cruel. Go ahead. He coughed instead, a hoarse, pitiful sound. His arms strained against the silver-threaded ropes binding him to the post. Ilyra leaned in, close enough that he could see the jagged scar that cut down the left side of her jaw, like a crescent moon struck in rage. This mark, she whispered. He gave it to me. Your alpha. The night he chose his throne over his mate. His breathing grew ragged. She tilted her head, almost curious. Did you watch? He flinched. Did you cheer when they dragged me through ash and salt and broke me to prove I wasn't yours? No answer. Good. She didn't want lies. Ilyra stood, wiping her hands on a torn cloth. Now, you'll tell me everything. She reached for a small satchel beside the fire pit, pulling out a strip of tanned hide and unrolling it carefully. Inside lay a delicate knife, curved, silver-honed, etched in moon script, and a vial of something thick and blue. The wolf's eyes widened. You've heard of truth venom, yes? Not one of the flashy ones. This is the kind that burns not through pain, but memory. She poured 3 drops onto the blade. I don't need to torture you, she said simply. I only need to remind you. The moment the blade kissed his skin, he screamed. An hour passed. Then another. By the time the fire burned low, he was slack in the ropes, voice gone, breath rasping. Ilyra sat beside him, hair wild, legs stretched in the dirt, a faint smear of ash across her cheek. So, she murmured. Nearest commands 2 of the 5 battalions. Thorn's grip weakens every time she kisses the elder's boots. No response. The man was barely conscious. You're expanding north. Scar Valley is almost fortified. You've rerouted the winter grain supply through Whisper Hold because the southern roads have rebel sympathies. She tapped her chin. And yet you send no patrols east. She looked at him again. Why? His mouth trembled. Because the dead walk there. The voice did not come from him. It came from the bone pile. Ilyra turned her head slowly. A single skull, yellowed and cracked, sat atop the corpse stele at the camp's edge. A monument of wolf remains, spines, ribs, shattered femurs, all heaped in ceremonial reverence. Forgotten. Feared. The wind shifted. I died there, the skull whispered. Not in battle. In silence. I died believing the Alpha. Believing you. Ilyra rose. She walked toward the stele, bare feet crunching over old ash. You're not real, she said. The skull laughed, a dry, hollow sound. You made me real. You spoke my name before sleep. She knelt, reaching for the bone. The skull whispered, you carry no Alpha scent. No bonded trace. The moon sees no claim on you. You are unmarked. I bear the scar, Ilyra said. Scars are not bonds. She smiled faintly. No, they're weapons. She lifted the skull in both hands and, without hesitation, pressed her lips to its broken crown. I remember you, she whispered. That's enough. The bone shuddered. Wind swept the clearing. The fire sputtered. Behind her, the mountain wolf prisoner stirred weakly, murmuring through the bone seal. What are you? She turned. Not your Luna, she said. She let the skull fall to the fire. Not his either. At dawn, the man was gone. Alive. She let him go. But not unchanged. He would carry the scent of blood and fear, the truth cut into his memory with a silver blade. He would carry it back to the moonspire, where suspicion already bloomed like rot beneath the marble. She left something else behind. A mask. It had no face. Just pale, cured flesh stretched over bone, eye holes hollow, mouth sewn shut. Pinned to its forehead, a jagged wolf fang. Pinned to its chest, a strip of parchment, inked in old black blood. Bring me your Alpha. She left it at the moonspire's outer gate before sunrise. By the time the priests found it, the shadows were already curling toward the heart of the city. Chapter 15. The Blood Oath of a Forsaken. The stones of the old circle had long since cracked. Wind dragged across the mountain's edge, tugging at torn banners left by a time no one dared speak of. Moss crept like fingers across the weathered monoliths, but the center of the ring, where the oath pool lay, remained untouched. Untouchable. Until now. Ilyra stood barefoot in the cold, the earth beneath her blood-warmed and unyielding. The pines howled overhead. Her breath misted silver in the twilight air. Around her neck hung a single thong, notched and blackened at the root. Her cloak was torn, marked by claw and ash, but she wore it like regalia. She stepped forward and dropped the wolf head she carried. It landed with a sickening thud beside the oath pool. The blood still dripped from its severed neck, pooling dark along the grooves carved into the sacred stone. They ran toward the basin like veins returning to a heart. 2 sentry wolves had followed her. They stood at the tree line now, uncertain, their hands on their blades. They had been ordered to watch the border, to patrol for rumors of her return. They hadn't expected to find her here. Ilyra didn't look at them. She knelt at the edge of the pool. Alpha must fall, she whispered. She dipped 2 fingers into the blood of the dead and began to write. One word at a time, across the smooth ancient stone. Alpha must fall. Her voice rose, not human, not even holy wolf. A call. A howl, not of grief, but of challenge. In the tongue of the old moon, she spoke the words that no bonded wolf had dared voice since the accord. Velder make luanar, trekar yai. The Alpha has broken the old pact. He must be broken in turn. The forest stilled. No wind. No bird. Even the pines seemed to lean in, listening. Then she reached into her satchel and drew her blade. A simple thing. Short. Old. Its hilt wrapped in leather she herself had tanned. Not royal. Not ritual. Just hers. Without ceremony, she sliced her palm open. Her blood dripped onto the oath pool's surface. It hissed. And then it shimmered. Silver light spread outward from the center of the pool like cracks in glass, dancing through every bloodline groove, every ancient rune. The pool lit up as if a moon had been born within it. The sentries stepped back. "What is she doing?" one of them whispered. The other didn't answer. They could feel it. A presence, not of rage, but something deeper. Sharper. Vengeance, pure and undiluted. The kind of wrath that carried no name because it had never needed one. The kind that wasn't shouted but carved into stone, into skin, into memory. Ilyra stood. The silver light painted her from below, casting twin shadows from her bare feet. Her eyes glowed now, wolf eyes, yes, but no longer the ones Thorn once knew. The irises were fractured silver, like shards of broken mirror. And through each ran twin slits of white-hot light, like molten veins split down the center of her pupils. Double-pupiled. Double-marked. She blinked slowly. She was no longer tethered to any alpha. No longer bound to pack law or bonded claim. No longer even fully wolf. She was outside the system. An imprint beyond the hierarchy. The first of her kind. She turned to the guards. "If your alpha wants peace," she said, voice calm as snow, "he will not find it." Neither spoke. She walked past them, bloody hand dripping, feet soft on the pine-covered ground. One of the wolves fell to a knee as she passed, though he didn't seem to know why. She didn't stop. The mountain would feel her declaration. And it did. Deep within the moon's fire, in the private quarters of the Alpha, Thorn staggered mid-step. His body seized. It wasn't pain like a wound. It was pain like a breach. Something had snapped in the spiritual weave he hadn't realized he still bore. He fell to one knee. A hand gripped his chest, nails digging into his shirt, trying to hold the soul that seemed to be peeling from inside him. His vision blurred. The bond. The bond that should have died. The bond he'd ordered severed. It was active. Not through mating. Not through Mumark. But through declaration. He whispered, gasping. She declared herself. Footsteps pounded through the hall. The door burst open. Nearest, breathless, and still in formal dress, stormed through. "Thorn? What is it?" She rushed to his side, hands outstretched, but he didn't let her touch him. "She's back," she said before he did. Thorn raised his head slowly. His eyes glowed now, not the amber of power, but the pale gold of memory. "She never left," he said. He stood, shoulders shaking. "She just waited. Waited until the moment I had most to lose." Nearest's voice trembled. "You swore the bond was dead." He didn't answer. Somewhere far away, a howl split the night. Low, steady, deliberate. Not rage. Not sorrow. A summon. Nearest took a step back. "What does she want?" she asked, voice thin. He stared out the window, toward the peaks. "I don't know." But his gut did. Not forgiveness. Not surrender. Not even recognition. She wanted only one thing. For him to kneel. In the dark silence of the oath ring, Ilyra stood alone again. The blood on her hand had stopped dripping. The wound had sealed. But the scar it left burned silver beneath her skin, permanent, deliberate, a sigil no alpha could command. She closed her eyes and let the wind rise. I don't want their throne, she whispered. She opened her eyes. I want them to kneel. Chapter 16. The Thorn in the Throne. The wind howled across the upper cliffs of Blackthorn Ridge, sharp as a blade drawn too long from its sheath. Beneath the sky smeared with storm-gray clouds, the Mufong Gate stood like a monument to silence. Built into the mountainside, its twin iron doors bore the scars of centuries, its pillars carved with the sigils of every alpha since the first wolf rose beneath the crescent moon. Today, those gates trembled, not from siege, but from something worse. Return. The guards stationed at the ridge were not green. They had fought in the Scorch Rebellion, some in the border hunts. They had buried their brothers with moon-carved blades and laid their Lunas to rest with fire rites. But when she approached, none raised their weapons. She did not come cloaked in blood or shadow. She wore white. Not the white of innocence, but that of a challenge. Ilyra stepped into view with a posture not of grace, but of claim. Her twin silver irises glinted like mirrored blades. No wolf wore eyes like that, unless they had stepped through death and walked out the other side changed. She carried no banner. Only her voice. I am Ilyra, she said clearly. Once Luna to be. Once declared dead by your alpha's judgment. Silence fell like snowfall. I invoke the right of spirit judgment. A rustle passed through the centuries like wind through dry pine. One stepped back, uncertain. Another gripped his spear tighter. From the high perch of the moon's spire balcony, word flew fast. By the time she crossed the threshold of the gate, Thorn knew. In the great chamber beyond, where the long stairs rose to the ritual hall, Nearest turned with a snap of her neck toward the herald. She what? Nearest demanded. She invoked the right, the guard said. At the gate. She came alone. Then she's insane. She wore white, he added quietly. And the wolves let her pass. Nearest did not wait for Thorn. She stormed up the steps toward the hall, toward the sacred chamber where spirit trial would be held. She did not notice her mate had not followed. Thorn stood still in his private sanctum, eyes closed, knuckles white against the iron of his ceremonial ring. Ilyra, he said aloud. He hadn't spoken her name in moons. The sound burned. In the center of the ritual hall, the stone basin glowed with pre-ignition blue. This was the old trial. The one no one dared call upon. It required the mate bond to respond to divine invocation, not memory or flesh. A trial of spirit. Of truth. Only those who had once truly been bonded could activate it. If the bond was severed properly, the trial would fail. If not, if the severing had been a mistake, a lie, or an act of fear, the wolf gods would respond. And the accused would not leave unchanged. Ilyra stood on one side of the stone pool. Thorn approached from the other, clad in his full alpha regalia. He did not look at her until they stood within the circle. Only then did their eyes meet. He did not speak her name. She did not bow. "You understand what this trial means?" asked the ritual keeper, an old she-wolf whose muzzle had grayed from moonstone breath. "I do," said Ilyra. Thorn nodded once. "And you accept its verdict?" "I do," they said in unison. The moment was quiet. And then, light burst from the pool like breath-breaking surface. The hall twisted. Not physically, but inside their minds. Spirit trials were not for flesh. They happened within. In a heartbeat, Thorn found himself not in the hall, but in a memory. He stood at the edge of the hollow pines. A girl bled out beneath the frost. Her hand stretched toward him. She had called him 3 times. He had turned once, then walked away. "No," Thorn whispered aloud in the vision. No, I had to." "I didn't ask why," came her voice, older now, colder, behind him. He turned. Ilyra stood there, the girl and the woman overlapping, face unreadable, gaze made of ice. "I came," she said, stepping closer, "not to make you believe." He backed up, but the ground gave no space. "I came," she said, voice a growl now, "to make you kneel." He felt his knees without choice. Not from force, but from the unbearable pressure of her pain pressing against his spine. "You said the bond was severed," she whispered. "But do you feel it?" He shook, trying to block her from his mind. But it was there, her scent, the curve of her voice like claws under his ribs. It had never left. He had only silenced it, buried it under duty, politics, and Neris's two sweet lies. "You turned," she said, stepping closer while I bled. "You turned, and I called your name 3 times. She knelt beside him now. "And you never looked back." He wanted to say her name, wanted to reach for her, to explain. But his tongue would not move. The gods would not allow lies in this place. Her hand brushed his temple. "This is not mercy," she said. "This is reckoning." The spirit realm fractured, and the ritual hall returned. Gasps rippled through the gathered elders. Thorn had collapsed, hands gripping the edge of the trial basin, blood dripping from his lip where he'd bitten it. Neris, who had entered the circle despite warning, lay unconscious, her wolf nature driven into dormancy by the sheer spiritual weight of Ilyra's presence. Ilyra stood untouched. The basin glowed. Judgment. Bond was real. Severance was false. She was no longer dead. She was vindicated. A murmur passed among the elders, some unable to meet her eyes. From the shadows, Cavan stepped forward. He said nothing, but as he turned, he murmured low to his attendant. "If she asks for the throne," he said, voice dry, "we will give it to her." Ilyra stepped forward, eyes never leaving the now kneeling Alpha across from her. She didn't say the words aloud. She didn't have to. He knew. She had not come for the crown. She had come for his fall. Chapter 17. The Luna Who Lived. They said the Luna was dead. They said her bones were scattered, her name sealed behind the throne's quiet silence. But when Ilyra stepped into Lunaflame Square, the entire mountain seemed to inhale. Dusk had barely settled. The old pyres along the plaza edges had not been lit in years, not since the war that silenced all rituals that might invoke names the council no longer acknowledged. Yet tonight, as if summoned by breath long held, the square flared alive with a low embered glow. She did not ride in like a victor. She walked, barefoot. Her steps left stains on the stone, not from dirt but from blood. Because she had sewn the old wolf pelt, the one that should have been her mating shroud, into the soles of her feet. Every stitch burned. Every step tore. Each footfall was a vow. "You erased me. I remember. You buried me." I walked back. The crowd was already gathered, too stunned to part, too ashamed to look away. Mothers clutched their children, elders remained rooted in the corners, guards stood slack-jawed in the arc of the square. She was no longer rumor. She was returning. The Luna Who Lived. And the path she took, straight toward the Luna Tower, the ceremonial temple that stood above the square, crowned by ancient white flame, was not for the dead. It was for the divine. Neris shoved past the outer rings of the crowd, her breath ragged, her robe askew. Her perfect braid had unraveled, silver strands sticking to her sweat-slicked temples. Her fury rang through the plaza like a snapped command. "Stop her! Stop her! She has no right to that path." No one moved. Ilyra did not look back. Neris's voice cracked. "She died. The bond was severed," Thorn said. "She invoked judgment," an elder said quietly. And the gods answered. "She's a trick," Neris hissed, teeth bared. "She's a shadow. Nothing more than grief in the shape of a girl." She lunged. The air rippled, not physically, but spiritually. Ilyra did not turn. She simply exhaled. And Neris collapsed to her knees, hands clutching her skull. Screams tore from her throat, guttural wet. The crowd gasped as she bit into her own arm, convulsing under pressure not of muscle, but of mind. "She touched the bond," someone whispered. She never let go. Ilyra walked on, leaving a trail of blood behind her like a stitched red ribbon up the stone steps. She reached the altar pyre outside the temple door, where the flame was cold and forgotten. She stood before it. Her hands unpinned the last remnant of the Luna ceremonial garb from her shoulders. The old dress, woven with silverbark thread and rites meant to bind her womb to the needs of the pack, slid to the stones. She did not flinch as she dragged it through her own blood. Then, wordlessly, she tossed it into the pit. Flame erupted, white-hot, ancient. It recognized her pain. It fed on it. The dress went up with a shriek, one that sounded almost alive. Ilyra turned to face the crowd. "I am not here to be forgiven," she said. Her voice cut through the square like a blade of bone. "I do not want your pity. I do not want your crown." She looked up to the temple behind her, to the black stone walls where Lunas before her had passed silently, obediently. "I do not return to bear your children." She stepped into the firelight. "I return to sing the war cry of those you left to rot in their own bones." Some gasped. Others fell silent. The flame cast shadows across her face, but the silver in her gaze gleamed bright. Not a ghost. A queen. Behind her, Nereus let out a final, broken sound and collapsed fully to the ground, shaking. But no one went to her. They were all watching Ilyra. For the first time, someone whispered, "She may be right." And it spread. Quiet. Dangerous. Like a spark among dry thistle. On the highest balcony of the temple, behind a curtain of carved stone, Thorn watched. He had not spoken since she passed through the gate. Now, as her voice rang through the square below, he gripped the rail with both hands. His shoulders did not shake, but his face, his strong, unreadable face, folded inward. And as Ilyra's voice rose in the air, weaving an old Luna lullaby once sung for warriors before death, something broke loose in his chest. "May your wolf not fear the dark," she sang. The old words floated like ash on wind. Thorn's eyes welled. He did not weep like a man. He wept like a beast finally remembering where it buried its heart. Chapter 18. The Madness of the Marked. The curtains were always drawn now. Inside the Luna chambers, shadows no longer waited for dusk, they lived here. Candles dripped themselves into wax puddles that no servant dared clean. The air stank of herbs scorched past usefulness. And on the floor, curled in silk like a coiled root, was Nereus. "She's watching," she whispered. No one responded. There was no one left to, except the mirror. She crawled toward it. Her nails were cracked, half-torn. Her once immaculate braid hung in a limp curtain, strands plastered to her temples with sweat. She reached for her reflection and whispered to it, forehead pressed to the glass. "She's watching. She's waiting. But it's me. It was always me. I was chosen." The mirror said nothing, but behind her own pupils, something moved. Not Ilyra, not exactly, but the memory of her. The ghost of her scent on Thorn's collar, the trace of her voice when he said nothing after Nereus bled herself raw to win his gaze. Nereus screamed. A short, sharp thing that rebounded off stone. Moments later, she was laughing. The mark on her back pulsed again. It wasn't a proper bond. It hadn't ever been. It was a leeching thing, half-formed, born of Thorn's hesitation and her hunger. It writhed. Not a bond. A scar. Elder Cavan arrived at dusk. He did not knock. He entered as one enters a sick room, face composed, hands gloved. He surveyed the destruction, the ruined bedding, the red-streaked mirror, the maimed scent stones crushed against the wall. "She dreams in screaming now," said the nursemaid outside the door, voice trembling. "She will not for much longer," Cavan replied. He raised a pouch of ash-bitter herbs and stepped inside. Nereus was on the floor again, rocking. "I told them," she said to no one. "I told them she died. I told them I bore the bond. I felt it. Cavan knelt beside her. "Nereus." Her eyes flicked to him. Something like recognition flickered, then shattered. "She's not back to punish us," she said. "She's back to replace me." "Good," Cavan said, unbothered. "Let her think she can." We need only let her believe she's winning. Nearest stared at him, mouth slightly open. You're not here to stop her? No, he said, with the smile of a priest preparing a pyre. I'm here to make you useful. He tipped the pouch into his palm. The powder shimmered unnaturally, like ground-down moonlight. Not meant for Lunas. Not meant for minds. Hold still. She did not. But he pressed the ash to her temples anyway, intoning the forbidden words used only when a bond failed and madness lingered long enough to rot a bloodline. Nearest shrieked. The mark on her back glowed like a branded wound. Her skin boiled in pulses, and her breath clawed from her throat in gasps too jagged to belong to wolves. Then silence. And then a scream, not of fear, but power. She rose. Hair wild, eyes glowing. I remember, she said. I was the one they bowed to first. Cavan tilted his head. Are you? I wore the veil, she said, approaching the mirror again. I knelt at the altar. I bled when the moon called. She was an accident. A shadow. A lie. Her reflection flickered. She tilted her head. Smiled. I see her. But she's not stronger. Just noisier. She turned to the corner where her favorite handmaiden had once stood. You believed her too, didn't you? There was no answer. Still, Nearest moved like there was one. She picked up a vial. Something dark sloshed inside. The scream that followed was high and brief. The handmaiden was found an hour later, mouth foamed, throat blackened. Cavan stood beside the body unfazed. She did it? Asked a guard. She's beginning to understand, Cavan replied. Should we remove her? Cavan shook his head. No. Let her break. Let her forget who she is. As long as she remembers who to hate. He stepped back into the chamber where Nearest now stood before the mirror, tracing symbols across the glass in her own blood. She was whispering. Over and over. The Luna is dead. I'm what's left. I'm what's real. Behind her, the shadows bent as if listening. And Cavan, watching her spiral deeper, murmured to the silent air, madness is as useful a weapon as grief. So long as she breaks Thorn before he remembers how to kneel. Chapter 19. The Mercy That Burned. The trial grounds were silent save for the low, warning growl of the assembled wolves. Ilyra stood alone on the highest stair of the Soul Hall, wrapped not in ceremonial silks, but in the shadows of her own making. The firelight touched the scar on her wrist, the one where the mate mark used to pulse. Now it was flat, pale, almost gone. Below her, Thorn stepped into the circle drawn in ash and blood. His armor bore no crest. No alpha sigil. Just steel and silence. The judgment wolves, gray-muzzled, black-eyed, lined the outer ring, their breath misting in sync, awaiting the old rite. Thorn lifted his chin, gaze steady on Ilyra. By clan law, I stand to face judgment for the wrong of declaring the Luna dead. Not dead, Ilyra replied coldly. Discarded. Buried alive. Forgotten. Gasps echoed among the crowd of watching wolves. Some flinched. Some looked down. Only Thorn remained still. The keeper of lore, ancient and blind, with bone beads threaded through his mane, stepped forward, voice hoarse with age. The spirit challenge is granted. If the forsaken Luna seeks retribution through the bond that once marked them, the Alpha must bear his soul. I am not his Luna, Ilyra said. But the bond still echoes, the keeper replied. You may silence it. Thorn gave a slight nod. Do it. The circle flared silver. Light swallowed the trial ground. And Ilyra fell. Not in body, but into the spirit plane, where breath had no sound and truth had no shadows. She stood before Thorn's soul. Not the Alpha. Not the warrior. Just him. The place was not empty. Fractures marked his essence, hairline breaks, like splintered glass beneath pressure. And there, deep in the marrow of it, pulsed a tether. The bond. Faint. Beating like a wound too long ignored. She reached for it. It recoiled, like it knew her touch was not for salvation. Thorn's spirit self appeared behind her, less solid, less defiant. Do it. Ilyra looked at him. The same eyes, the same jaw, but none of the heat that used to be home. She stepped forward. Her fingers hovered above the last thread of the bond, a silver twist of pain and memory, still coiled in the hollow of his chest. You wanted to forget me, she said. You buried me in silence. I screamed for you through blood. And you didn't turn back. I saw your body, Thorn said, hollow. You believed them, she interrupted. That was your crime. He didn't deny it. I could end this, she said, pressing her fingers gently to the thread. It shuddered beneath her, ready to be unmade. I could destroy what's left of your soul. I could rip it out and leave you nothing but the empty skin of power. His voice was quieter now. Then why don't you? Ilyra's hand trembled. But not from doubt. From release. She drew her hand back. Because you're already hollow, she whispered. And your death isn't worth my strength. The bond remained. Broken. Flickering. But not erased. She turned her back to him in the spirit realm. I don't forgive you, she said. I outgrew you. The circle burst into gold fire. And she stood again at the top of the stair, her chest heaving, not from exertion, but from the weight that had just lifted. Thorn was kneeling on the ground, doubled over, his face in his hands. You win, he said hoarsely. She descended 2 steps toward him. I didn't, she replied. Because you're not worthy of being my enemy. Then she reached behind her and pulled free the last token that bore his mark, a strip of silk, frayed and blood-stained, once tied around her throat in promise. She held it to the flames of the judgment pyre. It caught instantly. The symbol burned into ash, flaking into the wind. I am not the Luna of your throne, she said, turning to the crowd. Her voice rose, strong and steady. I am not the bound. I am not the broken. Wolves stared. Elders froze. No one moved. I renounce all alpha claim, she declared. And I will create what you all feared, what you never thought could exist. Her eyes flared silver. I will found the unmarked pack. Wolves who belong to no one but themselves. Murmurs turned into gasps. A young she-wolf near the front whispered, no alpha. She defied the bond, someone else breathed. She's free, said another. Ilyra stepped down the last stair, past Thorn who still knelt. His pride bled dry on the stone. She didn't look back. Because the past had no power anymore. And the future would wear no color. Chapter 20. Wolves Without Masters. The path to Fogbone Reach was carved through bones of mist and stone, a narrow chasm where wind screamed like spirits still seeking names. Few dared venture here. None returned unchanged. Ilyra stepped into the gorge alone. She had stripped herself of symbols. No Luna's sigil. No bonded thread. No crest, no chain. Only the burn-marked soles of her feet, scarred from the wolf hide she had stitched beneath skin. Every step had shed the old world. Every wound a vow. And now she arrived where the discarded waited. The fire pit in the gorge's heart flickered low, casting long shadows across the cracked faces of those who had once been told you are unworthy to belong. A boy with one ear. A she-wolf whose claws were broken from digging her way out of a burial trench. Another who never spoke, only bled beneath the moon and trembled when her mate's name was whispered. They stood around her, silent, gaunt, eyes glowing faint in the dark. They had no alphas. Only scars. I know what they called you, Ilyra said softly, voice curling through the smoke. Abominations. Runts. Failed bondmates. Witches. A growl rose. One of pain, not threat. I know because I was once called Luna and then Ghost. They said I broke the sacred tether. That I was unfit to bear the future. She crouched and touched the ash at her feet. They lied. Behind her, 3 women stepped forward, former bonded mates who had clawed off their marks, who had buried the children they were forced to carry, who had been hunted for rejecting the roles their blood demanded. "We are not your past," one of them said to the crowd. "We are what comes after." Ilyra nodded, then reached into her satchel and pulled free the object no wolf had dared destroy in 100 generations, the lost scroll of the mating rites. The parchment, still bearing the ancient ink of the first alpha's hand, trembled as it touched the air. Wolves gasped. Some stepped back. "We are told our purpose is to be claimed, to kneel, to obey the bond." Her voice grew louder. "That mating is destiny. That obedience is survival. That to reject the mark is to die." She held the scroll high. But none of those words kept me alive. Then, without hesitation, she threw the scroll into the flames. The parchment curled, cracked, turned black, and burned. A sound rose from the pit, not a wail, but a crack like a bone breaking open. Power swirled with the smoke. The law was no more. Gasps turned into cries. Not of fear, but release. "You are not broken," Ilyra shouted. "You were betrayed." She stepped into the circle of wolves. No more alphas who claim you because your scent matches their hunger. No more rights written by dead men who never bled like we did. No more binding of your power to their bloodlines. She unwrapped the cloth around her right arm. Beneath it, the old bite mark of the mate bond had faded into scar tissue. Raised. White. "This is the only mark I wear," she said. A reminder. Not a collar. Silence fell. Then someone knelt. Not to submit, but in recognition. A young male, barely shifted, eyes wide. "I want to fight for something that doesn't cost me my soul." One of the she-wolves, the mute one, stepped forward and placed her clawed hand on Ilyra's shoulder. Then nodded. And another. And another. Ilyra did not smile. She only breathed, sharp and sure. She raised a length of wolfskin, gray and ragged, and tied it to a splintered banner pole, planting it deep into the ash-laden earth. The first flag of the unmarked. The symbol of wolves who belong to no one. "We won't hide anymore," she said. "We will howl so loud the mountains remember us." They gathered around her, shifters once condemned, lovers who'd torn their own hearts free, warriors with no pack and no name. No longer waiting for rescue. No longer begging for mercy. Just wolves. The fire flared. Sparks rose. And somewhere above the canyon, the wind shifted. A sound followed it, low, strange, echoing. A howl. Not one. Many. It came from the stones, from the bones of the mountain, from every soul that had once died in silence. Now they called back, claiming nothing, owning everything. Chapter 21. The Bathhouse of Thorns. The moon above the Linares bathhouse was veiled, as if even the night itself dared not witness what bloomed beneath its silvery face. Inside, the waters stirred. Ilyra's steps made no sound. Her breath matched the rhythm of the steam, every inhale a string and a larger spell, every exhale a command in the tongue wolves no longer taught aloud. She had walked through the back corridors of the Moon Palace before, once as a Luna in waiting with wrists bound in ritual silk. Now she walked as something else entirely. Something untethered. In her palm, a glimmering rune, etched in her own blood and burned onto bone, throbbed with soft heat. "She dreams," Ilyra whispered to the shadows. "Let her see what she fears most." The bathhouse beyond the carved obsidian gate pulsed with warmth. Petal-strewn waters shimmered in moonstone basins. The walls were adorned with vines carved into silver, twisting upward like frozen serpents. In the main pool, Nereus slept, her body half submerged in the sacred mineral spring, her limbs languid, her lips parted slightly. Ilyra watched from the veil of mist. "She guards him even now," she murmured. Even in sleep. She raised her blood-writ charm and breathed a single phrase in wolf speech, the forbidden dialect twisted from old growls and ancestral lament. "See him. Take him. Lose him." The dream took root. Nereus twitched in the water. She saw Thorn. She saw his hand cupping Ilyra's face, his voice whispering the old bond words into her neck. You came back for me. She saw the sweat glisten on their skin, the way Ilyra arched into him like the fire had never left her body. Nereus screamed in her sleep. The water turned red with nosebleed. She surged awake, a banshee of rage, breasts heaving, eyes wild, and barked, "Where is she? Where is that bitch?" The sound of hurried feet echoed behind her. Lady Nereus? Riven burst through the veiled arch, armor half-clasped, dagger drawn. His jaw clenched, scanning the perimeter. What happened? You're bleeding. She's here, Nereus spat. She's in here. I saw her. She can't have. Don't tell me what she can't do. Her shriek cracked through the steam. She's been under our skin this whole time. From the far end of the bathhouse, a ripple of laughter emerged. Not mocking. Not sweet. Feral. Riven's head snapped toward the sound, and his pupils dilated. The spell Ilyra had laced into the chamber took hold. The mist twisted. Shapes within it pulsed and breathed. And there, barefoot, dripping, eyes abloom of silver rage, stood Ilyra. Or what Riven thought was Ilyra. Step back, he warned, blade raised. The figure didn't speak. It only lunged. Riven struck. Steel met flesh. Only when the figure collapsed did he realize who had taken the blow. Nereus. She gasped, clutching her stomach, blood running in streams over her thighs into the sacred waters. Her eyes locked on his, disbelief curdling into betrayal. You fool. No, Riven staggered back. It wasn't she was. Not real, came Ilyra's voice from behind him. The true Ilyra stepped from the mist, not imagined, not shaped from dreams, but solid. Alive. Smiling with all the grace of a dagger pulled slow from a wound. Dreams can be such treacherous things, she whispered. Riven turned too late. Her blade caught him under the chin, upward through the soft palate. His body jerked once, then fell like a dropped prayer. Blood spread in slow spirals through the pool. Nereus gasped, still clinging to the edge. Her arms could barely hold her above the water. Why won't you die? You asked the wrong question, Ilyra said, crouching beside her. Ask instead, why did you think you'd be safe just because I left? I was meant to be Luna. You were meant to be a cage. Nereus reached for her, weak, desperate. Ilyra caught her wrist. Pulled it away. I'm not here to kill you, Nereus. I want you to live. Her voice went low, silk over coal. To feel every inch of what it means to drown in what you stole. Then she drew a line across the tile with Riven's blood, inscribing the old sigil, the one buried in the pre-alpha lore, the one used only when vengeance was sanctioned by spirit, not pack. Beneath it, she wrote in blood. Let her drown in what she stole. Then she vanished through the veil of mist and back passage, before the alarm, before the footsteps, before the guards would find what she left behind. When Thorn arrived, the blood had already turned brown. Nereus lay curled in the shallows, unable to walk, her spine twisted, her voice a rasp. Her nails had carved half-moon scars into her own cheeks. He dropped to his knees beside her. Who did this? He demanded. Who? But Nereus only laughed, soft and wet, then sobbed as she gripped his hand with her broken one. She's still inside me, she whispered. Still in me. He called the guards. Called the elders. But when they arrived, it was not rescue they brought, it was judgment. Her mind is fractured, said Elder Cavan with cool detachment. The madness has consumed her reason. We cannot trust her words, or her will. She needs healing, Thorn snarled. She needs isolation. 2 guards moved to seize her. Thorn stood, growled, shifted partially in rage, but before he could act, a dozen more stepped forward. They did not bare their fangs. They did not tremble. They only stood silent, eyes steady. Orders already given. A trap already closed. One of the elders stepped to Thorn. We do not question your grief, Alpha. But this instability endangers us all. And it was your Luna who fell. The words hung in the air like a sentence. And Thorn, too stunned to breathe, did not see Nearest dragged away. He only stared at the blood on the tiles, now drying to rust. Outside the bathhouse, a single wolf cry pierced the air. Not a challenge. Not mourning. A proclamation. The power Nearest once wielded had cracked. And through its fracture, something else began to rise. Ilyra's war had no trumpet, no coronation. But it had begun. Chapter 22, The Shatter in His Eyes. The hollow of their once shared bond had long gone silent. But silence was not absence. Not tonight. Ilyra stood barefoot on the cracked obsidian of the hollow. The remnants of their soul link shimmered like spiderweb glass underfoot, fractured, yet still humming with unfinished grief. Overhead, no stars. Just the infinite dome of memory. Below, the weight of what should have been. She closed her eyes and whispered into the seam of their tether, the last fragile strand still pulsing faintly from her to him. "See it," she murmured. "Feel it." The tether shivered. The hollow began to breathe. And in the dark center of the dream, Thorn fell. Not from grace. Not from power. From memory. He landed on his knees in a forest dripping blood. It began the way it always did, the night he chose the law over her life. The wolves came first, howling from the ridge. Then the screams. Then her. She stood there again, in that impossible white, blood already soaking the hem. Her eyes locked with his, frantic, pleading. Her mouth formed words, but the howls drowned them. And still he turned. In the dream, he turned again. His boots crushed fallen branches. His cloak caught on thorn brush. The air was thick with her scent, iron, lavender, fire, but he kept walking. Behind him, she was dragged down. In the real world, his body twisted in sleep, breath catching. "No," he choked. The vision did not heed him. He passed the stone altar again, the place they'd first vowed. It stood empty now, windless, lifeless. Then the world shifted. Ilyra returned. Not as memory, but as wound. She crawled across the dirt, her fingers torn raw, her ribs visible through slashes of blood. Her voice, wet, hoarse, echoed as if from underwater. "Thorn." He flinched. The dream repeated. She crawled farther. "Thorn." A second time. He turned. Half turned. The tether inside him recoiled, resisted. Then, "Thorn." The third time shattered him. His entire body convulsed as he looked back. She was gone. Only bones remained, arranged in the shape of her final crawl, one hand outstretched where she had reached for him last. He dropped to the ground beside them in the hollow, the phantom taste of ash in his throat. In the waking world, his body arched with pain. Blood spilled from his mouth. The elders who stood watch over his chamber stepped back, afraid to touch him. "He's breaking," whispered one. "Something is tearing the Alpha Locus apart." Inside the hollow, Thorn screamed. "You didn't scream for me," came Ilyra's voice. Calm. Cold. Just beyond sight. "But I screamed for you. I reached. I bled. I waited." Her form appeared across from him, untouched now, dressed not in bloodied silk, but in wolf hide and salt silver armor. "You didn't kill me," she said, stepping closer. "You left me." Thorn crawled forward on his hands. I thought it was the only way." "Say it," she hissed. "Say what you did." His breath shook. "I left you." She watched him fold in on himself. "I left you to die. I heard you scream. I smelled your blood. And I walked away." Silence roared louder than guilt. He pressed his forehead to the ground. Not in worship. In ruin. "I was afraid," he said, choking. "I thought, if I stayed, I would break." "You broke anyway," she said. "But not enough." She raised her hand, and the dreamscape darkened. The sky cracked like glass overhead. Memory after memory split open. The night he watched her chained. The night he felt the bond sever. The night he held Nereus while Ilyra's name still burned behind his teeth. He saw them all. "I should have burned the whole system," he whispered. "I should have torn it down the moment they tried to touch you. But you didn't." "I didn't." His voice cracked. "And that makes me worse than the ones who threw you to the wolves." Ilyra didn't speak. She only knelt beside him. Her fingers didn't touch his skin. They hovered near his chest, over the place where the old alpha mark pulsed faintly. And then she reached in. Not with claws. With truth. His body jerked as if flayed. He gasped, chest heaving, as if something alive and screaming clawed its way through his heart. Then he did it himself. Thorn gripped the edges of the mark, invisible to all but their souls, and tore. He ripped the alpha sigil from his spirit. A sound like thunder cracked the hollow. In the real world, his chest bled. A perfect crescent of burned flesh wept beneath his sternum. His voice was only a whisper. "If there were another chance, I would have laid down beside you. I would have died where you fell." He looked up at her. Tears streamed down his face. "And if you'd asked again, I would have followed you into the grave." Ilyra's expression did not soften. But neither did she strike. "This was never about your regret," she said. "This was about my freedom." She turned, her steps echoing in the ruined hollow. "You carry your ghosts now. I carry none." And with that, she vanished, leaving him to kneel beside bones that never stopped reaching. Chapter 23: The Queen of Bone and Fire. The gate to the ossuary was not a gate at all, but a fracture in the world. Split deep beneath the mountains where no moonlight dared to fall, the passage bled rust and stank of memory. Long ago, the Blackthorn Alphas had sealed these catacombs with iron and prayer, branding them unholy. What dwelled within had no names, only growls, scars, and echoes of madness. Wolves stripped of reason. Mates who had lost their pairings and spiraled into ruin. Flesh eaters. Bone gnars. Forsaken things. Ilyra walked through the threshold barefoot. She wore no crown. Only a cloak of Tornish fur, the same pelt they'd once buried her in. Her hair was unbound, falling like bloodied silk down her back, streaked with soot from the fire she had lit and survived. Every step into the ossuary was a step into her past. Fangs had shredded her here. Nails had clawed her. She had screamed once. That part of her was gone now. The further she walked, the more the silence shifted. Not a silence of peace, but of waiting. And then she saw them. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Lurking in the shadows between bone pillars and ribcage arches. Their eyes glinted in the dark, mad, milky wide. Scarred muzzles lifted. Ribs heaved. Drool hissed on the cracked floor. The mad ones. She did not flinch. "I was one of you." A ripple stirred through the pack, uneasy, disbelieving. "They called me Gift. They called me Mate. They called me Luna." She raised her arms slowly. Ash swirled from her sleeves, and with it, a shimmer of wolf memory, summoned not from her own spirit, but from the shared bond she had shattered and learned to reshape. A vision bloomed before them. Not illusion, truth, made unbearable. It showed her kneeling, bound in silk and chain. It showed the elders passing sentence. It showed Thorn turning his back. Then, the wolves. The burial. The earth in her mouth. Her scream. The hallucination flared bright and vanished. No wolf lunged. None snarled. Instead, the closest of them, a brute with no ear and a shattered jaw, dropped to the floor and bit open his own throat. Blood spurted out, washing the bone beneath him. Another followed. Then another. The ancient ritual of feral submission. The rend of allegiance. Their message was clear. "We will tear ourselves open to show you we are yours." Ilyra did not cry. She stepped forward, boots sticky with the blood they offered her. She climbed the mound of bones in the center, the ossuary altar, where Luna-blooded bones had once been thrown, a warning to any who dared defy the system. Now it became her throne. She turned her face to the dark. I am not your mother, she said. I will not bear you sons. I will not chain you to names that harmed you. Her voice rose like fire through the halls. I am not Luna. I am not Bride. I am not broken. She lifted a femur from the mound and slammed it into the floor. A crack echoed. A fissure spread outward like a shiver of light. I am the queen of what you threw away. Her hand lifted again, a sigil of scorched marrow etched into her palm. I am the white-bone queen. A howl broke loose from a wolf in the rear. Then another. Then another. Until the ossuary pulsed with noise, shrieking, raw, agonized howls of wolves who had no language left for loyalty. Only pain. Only obedience through chaos. They gave it to her. She had not asked for their praise. She had demanded their truth. I will not teach you how to serve, she said as the sound reached a fever pitch. I will teach you how to live without masters. Her voice cracked once, just once. I don't want your children, she whispered. I want your vengeance. The last words dropped like oil into flame. The wolves rose to their hind legs. Not all of them made it fully upright. Some collapsed again, foaming, weeping, writhing. But others, those still half-anchored to sanity, held to the heavens with such force that the mountain moved. The vibration reached past the ossuary, past the gorge, past the fogbone trees where mist had long swallowed all light, and up to the black spires of the ruling seat of Blackthorn. There, High Elder Cavan sat beside his fire, listening to the stone tremble beneath his feet. A guard stepped forward, pale. My lord, he said. The howling is spreading. It woke the sentries. Even the pups. Cavan said nothing for a moment. Then, send mail. The vice envoy? He trained in silencing rogue dens in the eastern spine. Send him now, before the madness spreads. But the council. Cavan's voice dropped to a hiss. If she rises with an army of mad wolves, our entire dominion crumbles. Go. Back in the ossuary, Ilyra stood atop the bones, the wolves panting around her. No one dared approach, not even to touch her foot. But one figure emerged from the side alcove, a bent, brittle creature with blind eyes and a necklace of teeth. The grave warden, keeper of the ossuary dead. She bowed low, pressing her forehead to the ground. You have come back, she whispered. Ilyra looked down. I never left, she answered. Then she raised her voice again. Tonight, she called out, we are not reborn. We are remembered. The wolves answered her with their throats, and the fire in their howls cracked the bones beneath her bare feet. Chapter 24. The Death of the Old Blood. They came at dawn. Not with banners, but with torches that seethed blue in the mist. Mail rode ahead of the guards, tall and severe on a silver-coated beast bred for war. His armor bore the insignia of the Elder Tower, an obsidian crescent flanked by thorns. At his hip hung the ceremonial blade of arbitration, unsullied by actual justice. He rode into Fogbone Reach with the calm of a man sent to discipline children. Behind him, a contingent of 8 wolves, half-masked, branded emissaries, fanned out, weapons sheathed but claws unsheathed. They whispered the word parley like it had teeth. Mail dismounted at the edge of the shattered Forum of Stone, where the last treaties with the Forsaken clans had once been scrawled into rock and promptly ignored. Rain had erased those names, just as the elders had erased those people. Except one. She waited alone on the platform of crumbling stone, surrounded by nothing but silence. No banners. No guards. Only the thick, bone-tinged fog and the echo of forgotten oaths. Ilyra, Mail called, lifting his helm. You've summoned the envoy of the council with terms of peace. I expect you understand what it means to misuse the right of parley. I do, she said, voice low but clear. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her feet bare as always now. Her cloak hung like a pelt of shadows. Around her throat coiled a cord of teeth taken from every executioner who'd ever tried to silence her. You will state your demands, Mail said. I've only one, she replied. Mail waited. Die, she said. Here. Now. The guards reached for their weapons. Male raised a hand to stop them. You dare threaten an envoy under the rites of sacred negotiation? No, she said, stepping down from the stone dais. I threaten you under no right at all. Male's gaze sharpened. If you came to spill blood, then know this. I was raised in the Vale of WRMS. I've survived bone boil. You've never met a wolf with nothing left to lose. Her eyes shimmered, not with magic, but with the eerie stillness of a woman who had already walked through her own grave and chosen not to lie still. A low growl curled out from the mist. Not behind her. Around them. The guards stiffened. One dropped into a crouch, sniffing the air. Trap, he hissed. Too late. The ground beneath Male's boots pulsed. The old bones buried under the forum cracked and yawned. With a shriek, the slab split open, revealing a narrow pit lined with blackened stone and skulls still wet with old blood. Male tried to step back, but the stone beneath him turned slick. Not from magic. From oil. Wolves, not sane ones, crawled out of the fog like resurrected nightmares. Their bodies were twisted, some bearing second tails, others eyeless, but unerring in their step. These were not the broken. These were the rebuilt. Ilyra stood unmoving as Male was grabbed by the limbs and pulled, screaming, into the pit. He fought. Gods, he fought. Silver blade drawn, he slashed the first wolf's muzzle in half. But the blood that spilled wasn't red. It was black. It hissed where it landed on his armor. Do you know what this place is? Ilyra asked, voice cutting through the howls. It's where they dumped those two disfigured to parade. Too wild to use. Too damaged to breed. Male clawed at the edge of the pit. This is murder. No, she said. This is testimony. She raised one hand. The wolves paused. Male breathed ragged, propped against a jagged tooth of stone. His eyes were ringed with red. His mouth curled in hatred, but under it, something deeper. Fear. I brought a message, he rasped. You want to know the council's plan? Ilyra tilted her head. Cavan, Male choked. He knows your rise cannot be stopped through war. So he's turning to the rites. To the blood moons. Ilyra's eyes narrowed. Male coughed. Something in his lungs bubbled. They plan to cleanse the bond, he gasped. During the eclipse. Sacrifice Thorn. And you. Together. Your deaths. To purify the lineage. Ilyra stood very still. The fire inside her had burned before, but now it turned cold. Not rage. Not vengeance. Purpose. Why Thorn? She asked softly. Male smiled through the blood. Because he failed to break you. She nodded once. Then, to the wolves, begin. The madness began quietly. No screams. Only the sound of flesh parting. Bone crunching. Wolves feeding not with hunger, but with meaning. Each bite a rebuke to every bloodline that had called them worthless. When they were done, Male was nothing but a husk. Ilyra stepped forward. She dipped her finger into the blood pooling at the pit's edge and wrote across what was left of his chest. Let the old blood rot. Let the new refuse to kneel. Then she turned to the two largest wolves, shattered alphas once exiled for refusing arranged bonds. Bind what remains, she commanded. They did. With sinew. With wire. With broken laws turned into rope. Later, the body was delivered to the gates of the Elder Tower. Not thrown. Hung. His remains lashed to Cavan's private door with a crown of teeth and a banner soaked in fogbone blood. Pinned to Male's chest, a parchment marked in ash. Old law is a grave. We do not kneel in graves. Inside the tower, Cavan stared at the message for a long time. His face showed no emotion, but his hand trembled as it reached for the scrolls locked in iron. The forbidden rites. The ancient purge scripts. Summon the blood keepers, he said. But the rituals were outlawed. Then we unoutlaw them. Before she names herself more than queen. Outside, the fog grew darker. The moon above the city shivered, a pale slit waiting to be devoured. And in the ossuary below, Ilyra stood beside her wolves. She touched her lips to a shard of bone and whispered the first law of her reign. Old blood dies screaming. New blood is silent and sharp. The pack echoed her with a growl. Then silence. Only silence. Waiting for the moon to bleed. Chapter 25. The last touch of the bond. The forest wasn't real. Not in the way bark was rough or sap smelled sweet. Not in the way moss clung to soles or branches bent under wind. This forest breathed with the memories of pain. With love too ruined to rot, too stubborn to fade. Ilyra stood barefoot in the clearing, her dress silvering with dew that never truly fell. Her hair hung loose, unbraided, just as it had the night before she died in his mind. That night, the last one before the world cracked open. And now he walked toward her. Thorn emerged from the dreaming shadows like a man half awake, half drowning. He didn't ask where he was. Didn't speak. He only stared. At the forest. At her. At the night replayed as if fate could be rewritten. You brought me here, he said finally, his voice rough as gravel. This place, it's the night before. The night before you turned away. She didn't accuse him. She simply named it. He closed his eyes. His body trembled. His breath fogged in the dream air. Ilyra, he rasped. I've seen it already. You made me see it. Over and over. No, she said, stepping forward. I made you feel it. This time, I want you to touch it. The dream shifted. The stars above blinked out one by one, as if swallowed by unseen hunger. The forest pulsed with the scent of blood and pine sap. Somewhere, a wolf howled, a sound not mournful but hungry. Thorn's hand clenched. Is this justice to you? Torturing me in dreams? She tilted her head. No. This is mercy. A pale wind swept through the branches, and behind it came the flicker of someone. A girl-shaped memory. Her braid was looser than Ilyra's, her eyes bright and desperate. Cora, Thorn whispered, as if her name cut open some forgotten vein. The hallucination of the dead sister walked through them like mist, not seeing, not knowing, repeating a gesture that had no future. She turned toward an absent version of him, arms open. I forgive you, the mirage murmured. Thorn dropped to his knees. Ilyra did not flinch. She's not here, he said. This isn't her. But you always wanted forgiveness to come wrapped in a lie, didn't you? She said. Let me give you something else. She stepped into his mind fully, her presence more tangible than dreams should allow. He felt her hands on his chest, not warm, not cold, but exact. She didn't undress him. She unmade him. Layer by layer. Cloth. Memory. Pride. He gasped when her lips brushed his jaw, and when her fingers pressed against the ridge of his ribs, he arched, not from pleasure, but the ache of remembrance. You used to tremble when I touched you like this, she murmured. I still do. But you trembled because you feared needing me. Thorn said nothing. His breath grew shallow. Her hand splayed over his chest. Beneath it, the alpha mark pulsed faintly. A shimmer under skin, flickering like a dying ember. Ilyra, he whispered, eyes glassy. Please, don't leave me in here alone. I won't, she said. Not until you understand what it means to be stripped of power and still choose to feel. Then she kissed him. Not lips to lips, but mind to mind. Soul to soul. The bond flared. It wasn't a physical thing, not anymore. It was memory made flesh, every kiss they never gave each other, every cry swallowed instead of screamed. It surged between them, burning, breaking, bleeding. He gasped into her as the forest tilted. Their memories collapsed, her first glimpse of him bloodied in the arena, his first dream of her scent when he still thought she was prey. His hands on her throat in one world, her hands on his spine in another. Their spirits tangled, clawed, climbed. The wolf in him rose. Not the alpha, not the command. The boy, the broken. He howled, not aloud, but in the fabric of the dream itself. Their bodies dissolved into something deeper than flesh. Echoes and cries, the press of need, the gasp of longing that had no end but this. Then, just as the climax of spirit was near, just as he reached toward her, eyes flooding, lips parting in the rawest apology, she vanished. The warmth dropped away. The bond split open with a crack that was more felt than heard. Thorn collapsed forward into nothing. He gasped on his hands and knees. The grass under him was soft as ash. She was gone. Not just from the dream, but from him. And in that absence, he felt the truth like a blade sliding between his ribs. Her voice lingered, soft, final. "You don't deserve the love I gave you," he screamed. Raw, broken, boyish. The sound of a heart turned inside out. The forest darkened. The wolf inside him growled and then whimpered. He clawed at his own chest. The alpha imprint, once faint, was now gone. Nothing pulsed beneath the skin. He wasn't alpha. He wasn't bonded. He wasn't hers. Thorn remained on his knees, mouth open, sobbing into silence. Not a king. Not a killer. Just a man no longer chosen. Just a man left behind. In the waking world, Ilyra opened her eyes. Her lashes were damp. Her breath came steady. A single tear ran down her cheek. Not from regret. From release. She sat upright, the cave around her glowing faintly with bioluminescent moss. The wolves nearby stirred, sensing something shift. She whispered, "The last soft thought is dead." They tilted their heads. She stood. Firelight rippled along her skin as she stepped barefoot onto the ossified altar of the ossuary. She raised her hand, and a pale flame danced at her fingertips. Then, louder. "Now I will burn this blood." The wolves howled, not in hunger, but in promise. Far across the highlands, in a tower veiled by mountain mist, Cavan looked up. The eclipse was forming, a dark mouth swallowing the sky. He smiled, not with joy, but with certainty. "They'll both have to die," he said. The old blood had never left peacefully, and the new blood never asked for permission. Chapter 26: The Grave of the Vows. She came alone. No wolves flanked her. No shadows escorted her down the crumbled path that led to the Moobone grave, the place where the earth had once swallowed her body, and the world, her name. The valley was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that devoured breath. Bones jutted from the earth like broken promises, ivory white in the moon's rising glow. Old banners still clung to crumbling trees, faded with rot, once bearing the crest of kings and judgment alike. Ilyra walked barefoot across the dust. Each step stirred the ash of the forgotten. She was dressed in black, not mourning but ironwell. Her hair was unbound, wind carried like a standard of defiance. In one hand she held no blade, no staff, only a strip of silk, once belonging to a child who never reached womanhood. The silk was all that remained of Cora. At the center of the grave stood the great bone tree, its roots fed by slaughtered oaths, its limbs tangled with offerings made in fear. Here, beneath that pale cathedral of death, she had once been buried. Now she had returned not to rest, but to witness. They were already waiting. 3 of them, cloaked in the shroud of old loyalties and older sins. Alric, once a warhound in polished steel, eyes colder than his sword. The man who had held her down during her public castigation, fists unflinching as her ribs broke. Vera, the silver-veiled Luna successor, her voice always like honeyed poison. She had whispered Ilyra's fate into the High Circle's ears, sentencing her to the grave without drawing a blade. And Lennox, robes of judgment still pristine, mouth a crooked line of moral superiority. He had slit her wrist in the ritual and told her she deserved it. "Ilyra Vale," Lennox said, stepping forward. "You mock fate with your survival." "No," she replied, voice steady. "I simply denied yours." Vera's eyes gleamed. "You should have stayed buried." The sky above darkened. The blood moon climbed. Alric stepped forward, unsheathing his blade with a hiss. Per ancient right, We invoke the trial before eclipse. One soul versus three. If you are what they claim, the queen of bone and fire, then prove it. I'm not here to prove anything, Ilyra said. But we are, Lennox spat. To the old gods, to the law, to the truth of blood. The three moved as one. Steel. Spell. Curse. Their strike was a choreography of death, designed to crush, burn, and erase. She let them come. Because she had not returned alone. She had brought with her every lash they'd given, every breath stolen, every scream that died beneath that dirt. The moment Alric's blade kissed her skin, she changed. Bones shattered, not hers, but shape itself. Her body folded, broke, then reformed with violent grace. Ribs stretched, limbs bent backward, jaw split open with a howl not human. And from her emerged the second soul. Bone-white, flame-veined. A she-wolf built of ancient vengeance and sacred ruin. She towered. She roared. The blast of her howl shook the banners to tatters. Alric's charge faltered. The wolf lunged. One swipe shattered his sword. Another sent him sprawling into a cairn of skulls. He groaned, breath gone, ribs crushed, but lived. Vera conjured a flame sigil, shouting a curse older than fire. The bone wolf charged through it, wreathed in ghost light. Vera's barrier cracked like thin glass. Ilyra pinned her beneath a paw, eyes glowing with something almost sad. I will not kill you, the wolf said, voice human, shape not. I should, she added, pressing down until Vera sobbed. But your story will feed the new world better than your blood. She released her. Lennox tried to run. He did not make it far. She shifted mid-leap, bone to flesh, wolf to woman, tackling him to the dust. Her bare hands wreathed his throat, holding him against the roots of the bone tree. Say it, she growled. Say what? That you thought I'd be easy to bury. He choked on silence. She slapped him once, not for pain, but remembrance. Then bound his arms behind him with the silk from her hand. She dragged the three of them to the base of the wolf-bone tree. She didn't lecture. She tied them there. Three bound shapes, not to die, but to watch. You'll live, she said softly, almost like a lullaby. You'll live long enough to tell the next pack that I knelt in blood and stood in fire. That I came back from the grave and didn't need revenge to reign. They wept. She left them. She walked, alone again, to the shallow dip in the earth, the place where her lungs had once filled with dirt and her pulse went still. She dropped to her knees. The earth smelled like old tears. She pressed her forehead to the soil. A whisper, so faint the wind carried it before even she could hold it. Cora, she said. I didn't come back to make them bleed. Her fingers dug into the dirt, finding the bones of her younger self, what had been left behind. I came back to answer you. She laid the silk beside the spot where Cora had been burned, ashes gone now, but never absent. I came back for you. She stayed there for a long time, until the wind died and the sky bled deeper red. Then she rose. Her face was wet, but her hands were clean. She unsheathed the knife at her hip, not steel, but bone, carved from the femur of the first she-wolf she had ever slain. Her true name, the wolf name, etched into the hilt. She turned and strode to the gate of the grave, plunged the knife into the earth. The stone cracked beneath. The wolves far away howled as if answering a summons. Her voice carried through the valley. Next blood moon, no throne shall be ruled by bloodlines. And the howl that followed was not just hers, but theirs. Chapter 27, The Duel Under the Blood Moon. The moon bled red. Its rust-colored light spilled over the jagged ridges of Bloodrise Spire, casting long shadows that danced like specters among the gathered wolves. Hundreds had come, furred, clawed, or in flesh, to witness what had not been done in generations, a true alpha duel under the blood moon. The wind carried no songs tonight, only breath held tight in every chest. At the center of the stone dais, the twin circles had been drawn, one in ash, the other in blood. Ilyra stood barefoot in the center of the inner ring, her hand wrapped around the hilt of her bone dagger, the blade she'd pulled from the graves of her past. She wore no armor. Only the marks of old wounds etched across her skin like testimony. Thorn stepped into the outer ring. He no longer wore his crown. No cloak of fur. Just scars and breath, and the weight of 1,000 mistakes draped across his shoulders. Ilyra Vale, came the voice of the elder mediator. You come before the old blood and new, and invoke the right of equals. Do you carry the mark of resurrection? She pulled her tunic open, revealing the crescent sigil burnt over her heart, the sigil that no bloodline could forge, only the grave could gift. I do, she answered. The elder turned to Thorn. Do you accept her challenge? He nodded. I do. Then by the howl of the first Fong, the elder called, raising a staff carved with the names of long-dead rulers, let the bond be broken. Let the duel begin. The staff struck the stone. The howl echoed, not from the mouths of wolves, but from the bones of the mountain itself. They shifted in the same breath. One heartbeat, and flesh became fur. One blink, and wolves surged forth. She was a creature of pale flame, white as moo bone, trailing a ghost light from her paws. He was all smoke and storm, obsidian streaked with ash, his growl a dirge echoing from his ribcage. They collided like worlds ending. Claw met Fong. Blood met stone. She moved faster. He struck harder. They tore the ring apart, rock shattered, ground torn, shadows scattering beneath the clash of two forces not born to live together. Then the second battle began. Their bodies continued to fight, but their minds, their souls, met on another plane. A forest on fire. A mirror broken. A cradle torn in two. She reached for him through the blaze, and he met her hand not with warmth, but with teeth. You left me, he snarled, in their shared memoriscape. You broke everything. I was never yours to keep, she said, her voice rising with the storm. You were the only thing I could feel. And still you let them burn me. Their memories clashed. First kiss beneath the ash tree, first fight in the war hall, her chained form in the snow, his hand on her throat as he pleaded for loyalty. I never stopped, he whispered. Then you should have died with me. The wolf inside her snarled. The world inside him broke. Back in the waking fight, she pinned him. Her jaw closed around his shoulder. Not to rip, but to mark. Blood poured down his flank, hot and sharp, steaming against the night air. He tried to rise. She drove him back down. Thorn howled, not in power, but in pain. I yield, he whispered, half-choked. She froze above him. He looked up, blood in his teeth, sorrow in his eyes. Kill me. No, she said. She returned to her human form, naked under the moon, breath fogging the air, sweat and blood gleaming on her skin. She pressed the edge of her dagger to his throat. He did not flinch. You're not a king, she whispered. He closed his eyes. You're a wound, she continued, voice cracking like ice beneath too much weight. And wounds do not rule. She lifted the blade. He did not rise. I won't kill you, she said, kneeling beside him. Because you will never get back up. The mountain held its breath. A long, awful silence stretched over the spire. Then, one wolf fell to his knees. Then another. Then 10. Then 100. Until the entire crowd lowered themselves, not for blood, not for dominance, but for the mercy they had never seen before. She stood, tall and broken and victorious, the blood of her bond-mate still warm on her hands. In the far ridges above, hidden beneath the crags, Cavan watched. He did not kneel. He turned from the scene. She doesn't just win, he murmured, to no one. She ends. The blood moon sank lower, its light dimming. But Ilyra still stood. And the mountain remembered. Chapter 28, The Alpha Without a Chain. Ash still clung to the ruins of Luna Hall, where pillars once bore gold and law. Now only the broken ribs of the old order jutted toward a smoke-blurred sky. The mountain wind howled through the hollow arches, cold and sharp, like the breath of something ancient dying at last. Ilyra stood barefoot on the cracked stone of the fire oath altar, her shadow long in the amber light of the dying pyres. The wolves gathered around her, not in ranks, not in submission, but in wary, uncertain circles. Survivors. Fighters. Witnesses. She had not asked them to come. She would not ask them to stay. Behind her, the last of the sacred banners burned, those of the Alpha bloodlines, the Luna line, the maid-bound crest. I was chained beneath those colors, she said, her voice raw and unadorned, cutting through the air like flint on bone. I died beneath them. And I was resurrected without them. No one answered. But they watched. The fire oath altar had once been a place of coronation, where Lunas knelt beside crowned alphas, where hands were branded, where fates were sealed. Now she stood there alone. Cavan has fled, she continued. The elders are scattered. Their laws are ash. Their blood no longer commands yours. A murmur. Low, uncertain. She turned to them fully, raising the blade carved from the moobone grave, the same that had tasted Thorn's blood beneath the blood moon. I was never an Alpha's wife. I was never a Luna. I do not stand here as heir to your broken lines. Then what are you? Someone called from the crowd, a voice trembling more from hope than doubt. She knelt, deliberate, slow, and drove the bone blade into the fire-scorched altar stone. I am the soul mark. Silence. I do not ask you to kneel, she said. I do not ask for your obedience. I ask only one thing, to be seen. And for you to decide, each of you, if you would choose this path. She took the knife again, held it to her palm. Let the old markings burn, she whispered. She sliced. Blood welled up, seeping down her wrist over her fingers. She crouched and pressed her hand, open, bleeding, into the altar's heart. The flame flared. Not in red, not in gold, but white. A soul's fire. A forge of will. I mark this place not with a bloodline, but with loss. With everything I crawled back from. With the grave of what was taken. She stood again, lifting her blood-stained hand to the sky. Her voice broke, but she did not falter. No more Lunas. No more alphas born by seed or by slaughter. Her eyes found every gaze that dared meet hers. From this moment on, the only alpha is the one without a chain. The silence cracked. One wolf, young, silver-furred, her flank still scarred from the rebellion, threw her head back and howled. Another joined. Then another. And another. Until the ruins trembled, not with submission, but with sound. Wolves howled for her. Not because they had to. Not because it was law. But because something inside them remembered what it was to rise. She turned from them, shoulders loose, breath trembling. I don't want your worship, she said softly. I don't want your leash. Then louder, if you cannot stay without control, leave. And some did. 12. Then 24. They left in silence. Not out of hatred, but because they could not see her, not truly. And she would not ask them to pretend. She watched them go, then looked back to those who remained. They did not kneel. They stood, scarred, tired, blood-slicked, and lifted their heads in silent salute. She nodded once. No smile. Just a breath released. I only ask, she said, that you watch me. Not to follow. Not to judge. Just to see. The fire behind her roared once more, bright and high, and then sank into embers. She tore the last vestige of ceremonial ribbon from her arm. Let it fall to the stones. The past did not burn quickly. But it did burn. And somewhere deep inside, where the old wolf blood once snarled for hierarchy and claim, Ilyra felt quiet. Not peace, but something like it. Chapter 29. The Ash and the Spring. The path to the Spring of Luni was neither marked nor blessed. It wound through stone-cracked earth, past skeletal trees that bore no bloom, into a hollow swallowed by moonlight and silence. No wind stirred here. No beast dared tread. It was a place the old wolves called sacred, not because it offered peace, but because it asked for truth. Ilyra carried the urn pressed tight to her chest. It was small. Too small. Her palms, scarred and silent, trembled slightly as she stepped into the glade. The spring waited at the center, a mirror of still water cupped by crumbling silverstone. No steam rose, though legends called it warm. No ripples disturbed the glassy surface, though tears had been poured into it for generations. She moved barefoot across the pale ground. Dust clung to her skin. Ash clung to her bones. Cora's name had not been spoken aloud in this place for years. No one remembered her scream. But Ilyra remembered. She knelt by the spring and set the urn beside her. No ceremony. No altar. Only a girl and a ghost, and a promise that had survived everything else. She uncapped the urn. Inside, the ashes shifted, almost weightless. Ilyra lifted a handful, fingers curling as if to hold, then splaying open to release. Gray dust swirled into the spring, disappearing beneath the surface without a sound. She took another handful. Another. Until there was nothing left but the taste of soot on her tongue and a tightness behind her ribs that refused to break. Then she sang. Not a song shaped by melody. A sound that was older. Raw. Wolf-tongued. The language of mourning, cracked open by a child's memory of lullabies turned to screams. Her voice wavered, rose, fell, shattered, rebuilt. And still she sang. Cora, she whispered. They let you die like you were nothing. They burned you to silence. She cupped water in her hands and let it wash over the lip of the urn until the last traces of ash were gone. You died too quietly, she said. No one heard you. Her voice cracked. Her hands shook. I will make them remember. She rose, eyes wet. The spring reflected her not as she was, but as something limned in grief and firelight. Behind her, the rustle of movement. She did not need to turn to know it was him. Thorn's steps were slower now. Limping. Bruised. His once proud frame bore the scars of both spirit and flesh. The fire in him had dimmed, not extinguished, but tempered. He stopped a few paces behind her. I shouldn't be here, he said, voice hoarse. No, she answered, without turning. You shouldn't. A silence stretched between them. Not angry. Not expectant. He lowered his head. I came because you were right. About me. About all of it. She waited. I can't undo what I was, he said. But I can stand for what you buried here. If you'll let me. He took something from his belt, a blade, sheathed, and placed it on the stone near the spring. Not as offering. As surrender. I ask for nothing, he said. Except the right to stay here. To guard this place. To remember her. And to carry the weight you shouldn't have to anymore. Ilyra turned. His face was drawn, but open. Bruised, but clear. She stepped forward. He didn't move. Her fingers, still damp with spring water and ash, reached up. And she pressed them gently to the center of his brow. He exhaled, shuddering. She left a faint streak there, gray, like shadowed stars. The last mark, she murmured. He looked up, eyes searching hers. She met his gaze. I will not love you, she said, quiet and firm. But I will not hate you anymore. He bowed his head. That is more than I deserve. No, she whispered. It's exactly what you deserve. The wind stirred at last. A breeze rolled across the spring. The surface rippled. Somewhere deep beneath, the ashes settled. Ilyra turned from him, from the spring, from the ghost she had carried in her chest for too long. I will not return, she said over her shoulder. Thorn said nothing. She didn't wait for him to follow. Behind her, he knelt at the water's edge and watched the ripple fade. One hand rested against the blade he'd left. The other pressed flat to the earth. He whispered a name. And she walked into the darkness, not fleeing, not hunted, but finally unchained. Chapter 30. The last bond is with myself. They said I should have died in the grave. The day they buried me beneath broken bone and silence, they carved no name, lit no flame. Just turned and walked away like I'd never howled, never bled, never loved. A silence that suited them. A silence they hoped would smother me. But silence is not death. And I did not stay dead. I clawed my way back, not through prophecy, not through the mercy of fate, and certainly not through love. No. I returned because I refused to let their hands be the last to touch my story. The new stones under my boots are not blessed. The altar is not crowned with sacred markings. There is no scent of iron incense, no white cloths to honor old gods. Only wood burned clean, carved with memory. And wolves who wear no collars. They gather beyond the tree lean, residual shadows, half-forgotten names, the rejected, the disfigured, the ones with eyes too old for their years. They are not beautiful. They are not chosen. And they are mine. I will not call myself Luna, I say, voice sharp as bone cut from marrow. I've worn that title. It was a leash wrapped in silk. No one interrupts. No one bows. That is the first rule of this pack. No knees to soil in service of thrones. I will not be alpha, I continue. That blood has drowned too many. I press my fingers to my left arm, just above the burn scar where old bonds once branded me. The knife I raise is not ceremonial. It is mine. It has tasted both my blood and my enemies. The blade bites. A clean line. Not for pain. For truth. I etch the spiral of the final spirit mark, slow and deliberate. Not a crest. Not a claim. A wound that does not plead for healing. For those who live, I stand, I say. For those who died, I speak. The blood drips. The mark is complete. This is no rite of dominance. It is remembrance. They watch me, not in reverence, but in recognition. You want law? I ask the stillness. Here is your law. No bloodline decides who leads. No sacred bond owns your soul. No god demands your knees. The trees do not answer. The stars do not blink. But the wolves, they breathe. You want worship? I spit. Worship what bled. Worship what broke and still stood. Worship the memories that refused to fade and the scars that built you a spine. My voice does not rise. It sinks like stone into marrow. You remember me not because I was a Luna. I turn toward them, the crowd of mangled hope and feral hunger. My shadow splits against the fire. You remember me because I never belonged to a throne. Except this one. I slam my palm over the fresh wound on my arm. The mark glows, faint and raw. The one I carved into myself. No hells erupt. Not yet. They do not cheer. They do not kneel. But they see me. The wolves who lost their names. The ones who watched mates die and never howled again. The ones who were too wild, too broken, too full of questions to kneel to a legacy they never chose. They see me. And that is enough. I step from the altar, bones aching. Blood drying in the wind. I walk into the night forest. Alone. Until the paws begin to follow. One. Then another. Then dozens. They do not march. They do not call me queen. They move because they choose to. Not out of loyalty. Out of recognition. Behind us, far beyond the reach of old graves and burned thrones, a sound rises. Not the polished call of a council. Not the guttural oath of an alpha. A howl. High and raw. Not bound to any name. Not tied to any chain. Free. The kind of howl that echoes. And answers itself.